Your App Store.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Yeah, you're welcome along. It's OTB AM, and have we a special for you today? There's no Republic of Ireland manager whatsoever in the 4 divisions across England. So we have Nathan Murphy in to pick his team of the half season so far. Forget about Tuchel and Rangnick all over the papers of late. It's all about Murphy this morning on OTB AM. Brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. We've actually loads to get through on the show today, including 2 LOI starlets who are off to the SPL. This is kind of an extension of, I guess, what myself and Rory O'Connor were talking about on yesterday's show. This massive influx of players from Ireland going over to Scotland. That's just part of the show today. There's only one place to start. Manager Murphy, how are you?
Well, I really wasn't sure where you were going with that introduction. Well, there's a shock. Happy New Year to you and to all the viewers, Johnny.
What's going on?
Saying that? Not a lot. Not a lot is going on with anybody at the moment, is it? It's all a little bit dead and a little bit dull at the moment. I'm sort of looking back at the Christmas going, where did it go? Never got the trip down home. Never got the few pints on Stephen's night and Garth Delaney's and Ballyhonest. Never had that sort of 2 a.m. bleary-eyed nostalgia with all the lads you went to school with, all that sort of nonsense. So yeah, it's just sort of we're back at work, aren't we? And it's like, wow, where'd that go?
Well, how was your Christmas day with the kids and so forth? I believe they got Shamrock Rovers season tickets among their Christmas stocking.
Wow, Santa was good this year, wasn't he? He many Premier League jerseys and Shamrock Rovers season tickets. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about this because obviously they got Shamrock Rovers season tickets. So I also had to get a Shamrock Rovers season ticket because it turns out you can't just send a 9-year-old and an 8-year-old off to Tala by themselves on the loose and say best of luck there, lads. It feels like becoming a bit of a dub. So you got a season ticket for a team. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but yeah, I'm excited. I'm already sort of sweating about the restrictions and the end of February and the first home game, and the lads are looking at the fixture list and they're buzzing about what games they can go to. They're wondering, can they go to away games? Do we get to go to the Champions League games? And you're sort of hoping that the restrictions mean they can just even go to the league games when the season gets underway. But yeah, I've been going for the last sort of 3 or 4 years, easing them in gently, and they absolutely love it. And I think it was capped on the final day of the season when Rovers got the title, and it was just such a brilliant atmosphere out there, and there was thousands of kids out on the pitch afterwards, and they get to meet all the players, and it sort of gives them that connection that they're just now desperate to go back. And rather than 3-4 years ago just going because they wanted the bottle of Fanta at half time, now they know the players and they're excited about the players and they know some of the songs and they know the chants. And yeah, I'd encourage. It's funny, I was out yesterday for a walk with a friend of mine who lives sort of just past Tala and is a kid the same age, and was telling him I should bring him along to Rovers. He's going, oh, is it not a bit rough around the League of Ireland matches? And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, oh, it's all that stuff around the cup final, which is the sort of place you be bringing a kid. And I was like, what? And I was frustrated at the time with the conversation that followed around the cup final. But when you're sort of in the bubble of going to matches and being around football a lot, you sort of presume nobody listens to it, and you sort of assume that people realise it is a one-off, that you can go to 99.9% of League of Ireland games and there's never any trouble. That, yeah, there's an atmosphere. And, actually, the best games at Rovers in the last couple of years have been the matches against Bowes and Dundalk, where there is a bit of an atmosphere. Actually, it is a little bit raw because, you don't want trouble, you don't want any scraps, you don't want anything.
Kids only love that.
But actually, where everyone, one of the things all the kids love, I find, is like everyone cursing. Like their eyes light up when they're in a match and somebody's cursing behind them. It's like, wow, I'm out in the open. But actually, my mate's from Scotland, and so wouldn't be fully au fait with everything that's going on in the League of Ireland, and is a Rangers fan, so would be well used to, Old Firm, that he is telling me he's not quite sure about going to a League of Ireland game because he'd heard there might be a little bit of trouble. I was a little bit shocked, so I obviously set him straight and said, actually, I think Tala right now, particularly with the facilities that are there, you got to be bringing them.
Yeah, and I think kids are probably better off going to League of Ireland games than being on their phones as well. I mean, they might hear a bit of cursing and swearing, but like it's live football. It's doing stuff with your dad in this case as well. Just on that, Nathan, you mentioned the restrictions. I mean, at the moment, I suppose worst case scenario for the League of Ireland right now would be 5,000 a cap at the games, which kind of be fine. But Ciara Kelly.
Well, it's half capacity.
Yeah. If
it depends on the size of the stadium. So most places, I assume, and from chatting to a couple of people, will be fine for season ticket holders. But the problem is, from a club's point of view, that they have no revenue coming in at all on the day if it's just limited to season ticket holders.
But is this not completely bonkers? So Ciara Kelly was on yesterday just talking about the figures and her perspective on it, which I think is worth listening to. You'll find it on the channels or whatever. But this is frustrating for League of Ireland clubs because obviously, and frustrating for everyone, but they need some sort of security as well. And we're talking about small figures in outdoor venues going to games. As you mentioned, they've no revenue streams at the moment.
Well, this is going to become a huge talking point over the next couple of weeks because we're less than a month away from the start of the Six Nations, and there's stories in the papers this morning about Six Nations chiefs want the matches to go ahead even behind closed doors. And I think that'd be hugely damaging for the RFU, who need the revenue of full Aviva Stadium. But obviously, there's a massive television deal around that the Six Nations organising body need this to go ahead to protect the television deal. The problem for the League of Ireland, as we know, is one of the few major sports that they don't have any real television deal. They're not the games going ahead with a reduced crowd or just season ticket holders where, remember, for season ticket holders, the money's already in. So you've got your cash now. You're not getting another 2,000 people walking up on the night and you're missing out on all that. And you're not getting any extra revenue because the games are on television. So it would be enormously damaging for the League of Ireland if it was to go ahead with any sort of restrictions. But it's going to be enormously damaging for, I think, all the different governing bodies and all the different sports if these restrictions are still in place. The League of Ireland still has a couple of months, and if the trends of Omicron follow what it's been in South Africa and what it's been in other countries, we'll hit the peak quite soon, and hopefully it's a fairly steep decline afterwards, and by the end of February we're back in position. But the current restrictions are in place still a couple of days before the Six Nations start. So that Wales game has to be in real doubt in terms of having 51,000 people there. But you would have to hope by the end of February that outdoor sports stadiums are allowed to have a full capacity. We're in a pretty bad place if they're not.
We are, and like just from the League of Ireland perspective, you're talking about obviously small crowds, but I think as much as the FAI has been beholden to government, we do need some voices on this. Where is the evidence at all that League of Ireland games, for example, are super spreaders or anything like that? And if you're telling a fellow who's triple vaccinated that he can't do one thing that he enjoys every weekend, going to see Galway United or going to see Cork City or whatever, he's done everything, and now you're saying he can't go in because it's full or there's a reduced capacity. I'm getting very riled, and it's only 7:37, Nathan. I think it's time to go to.
The conversation hasn't changed around that, though. I think the experts will tell you that it's not about the match itself.
The gathering,
the gathering and the public transport. But again,
how about trusting people though to actually behave themselves? How about trusting people?
Well, I think you can trust people to behave themselves, and I don't think anyone is misbehaving when it comes to this. Nobody is trying to congregate, but you would have this bizarre situation where, say, a Shamrock Rovers are playing Bohemians at 8 o'clock, and you can be across the road in the hotel having a drink in a crowded hotel until 8 o'clock. But then actually you can't go to the match afterwards, and you also have to get out of the hotel because that's going to shut at 8 o'clock as well. Like, these are the things that I think are really starting to frustrate people and piss people off now, those sort of conflicts. But I don't think League of Ireland is going to be anywhere near the top of the consideration when they're thinking about allowing supporters back into stadiums, unfortunately. Yeah,
you mentioned the pub in Ballyhaunis. Breslin's a pub in Ballygar closed earlier this week because of the COVID restrictions, and we need to think of people like that. Like, Breslin's came into Ballygar, they basically set up a restaurant in a town that badly needed it and a pub that was needed as well, and everyone loved them, and they had to go because of COVID. And there are lots of examples of that in rural Ireland. So let's not forget as well that a lot of people have suffered in rural Ireland in places that COVID barely even existed actually in some cases. Anyway,
did you have a disco in Ballygar, Johnny?
No, that was Montbellew. It was Barrett's. That was the place to be, as it were, back in the day. You'd obviously try to get in and put on your best looking 18 or more look, which took me till I was about 25, I think. But they were the days. I mean, the Sound of Music in Glenamaddy before that, where my parents met. I'm sure your father, Mihal, is listening in with knowing ears and knowing eyes.
I probably played there, all right. Yeah, I think we used to go to there was certain discos where if you're from Ballyhonus, you weren't advised to go to. I thought that maybe the one around Mount Bellew, Ballygar was the one that we were told avoid. You wouldn't be welcome. The locals, Johnny.
There was always Rockforts and Roscommon as well, which is a controversial place to go around.
You never made your way to Midas, no?
No, the Midas touch, eh? There we go. Just going to leave it, right? Coming up on the show today, PL team so far, which is actually now, so that's Nathan's team. We're going to get to that very shortly. Ross Tierney and Dan Cleary, two of the League of Ireland starlets, off to the SPL. I'm looking forward to that chat because I think that's been a bit of a trend. Will O'Callaghan will talk sport at 8:30. Colm Boohig, 8:45, is going to talk about the very controversial Djokovic exemption for the Aussie Open. Have to say, I'm a bit like you listening in to this if you haven't sort of much background to it, but it does sound a little bit like one rule for the rich, one rule for the poor. We'll see what Colm has to say about that. Daniel Davey is a nutritionist. Obviously, we had Jessica Barr on yesterday about kind of running, I guess, throughout the month of February and making your New Year's resolution that. So anyway, after Jessica came on, I went into the cab home and the cab driver was telling me 62 years of age. He gave up the drink at 29 and he became essentially a bit of a running addict. He still runs several times a week at 62. It was one of the most uplifting taxi journeys certainly I've had. I'm not sure about him, but he was telling me all of this and I was telling him about Jessica, and he said running for his mind has been unbelievable. And in conjunction with that, if you are on dry January or you are doing whatever it is, food is very important. And Daniel Davey will talk nutrition, the meals that you should have or shouldn't have in your week. That's coming up at 9:10, and then we'll hear about Andy Mitten, of course, 9:30. Nathan, just talking about Man United, which is literally the gift that just keeps on giving. Like, how long is this now? Since it must be nearly since Fergie left. It's been every single day we've been talking about Man United. Lots of stuff in the papers, which we will get to today, about so-called ructions in the dressing room and all that, which is obviously rather evinced in the performance the other night against Wolves when they were pathetic.
Oh, last night was as bad as anything we've seen from Manchester United. Remember, this is a Wolves team who are maybe one of the
two nights
duller.
Ago. You're struggling with the States as much as me.
2 nights ago. If it's not Wolves might be the dullest team in the Premier League. And I don't mean that as a massive insult that it sounds, but they're very defensive minded. They don't play this swashbuckling brand of football. And then you watch them against Manchester United, and that's exactly what they're allowed to do. And while it was only 1-0, this was as bad as anything that we saw under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And the papers today, I think, sum up the problem at the heart of Manchester United. It's leak after leak after leak, bitching and moaning to the media, getting your side of the story out. The dressing room is unhappy. Edinson Cavani and Mason Greenwood are unhappy that certain players are assured of their position. Sort this out in the dressing room. But every second day there are stories about the Manchester United dressing room and certain players are unhappy. And also, there's very few players in that Manchester United squad at the moment you can look at and really listen to their concerns and care about their concerns, because none of them are delivering. Mason Greenwood, for all the talent, is he the first name of the team sheet right now? Has he done enough to say, you know, I'm the best 19, 20-year-old in world football right now, you have to pick me every week? No, he flatters the deceive every second match. Marcus Rashford's form has been bordering on a disgrace all season, typified by that pass towards the end last night. Ronaldo, I know you touched on it yesterday, clearly hasn't made the impact he wanted. And very quickly, there's questions coming in around Ralph Rangnick and his maybe lack of experience at a club the size of Manchester United, dealing with players of the size of the ones that are inside that dressing room, and can he deal with it? And it feels as though the conversation around should he stay on past the end of the season has gone very, very quiet. We'll
have Coach Murphy very shortly. He's half team of the season, and we'll also talk a little bit about Kieran Trippier's return to England. But if you were the Man United manager, Coach Murphy needs to be ruthless. What does he do right now? Does he kind of almost like look to what am I going to do ahead of next season? What can I do to patch up things ahead of the start of next season? Does he sacrifice some big names? Does he change the system, which seems to be a bit stilted at times? What would you do?
I don't think you can think about next season and think about planning for next season. This is Manchester United. You have to qualify for the Champions League. And I always go back to an article Rory Smith wrote a few years ago about when the best players in Europe are looking for a club to sign. Guaranteed Champions League football is one of them. And at Manchester United, you just can't get that. And we're looking at what's potentially going to be one of the busiest summers in the history of football in terms of money spent if Mbappe goes, if Haaland goes, if Declan Rice goes. And there are three, well, certainly two in Haaland and Rice that Manchester United should be interested in and should be in the market in. And if you're not in the Champions League, it's hard to see how you get either of those. The big question is still, what do you do with Ronaldo? And you could spend all day trying to figure out, should you drop him? Should you drop him? Is it possible to implement the style of play that Ralph Rangnick wants with Cristiano Ronaldo in the side? Can you press high with Ronaldo in the side? I think at this stage he's got to give it a go, because while when he came in first, there was a feeling, well, you can get the other 9 outfield players to press and be intense and let Ronaldo do his thing and chase around a little bit and cover the gaps, and he'll score you the goals. It'll be fine. That hasn't worked. So go with Mason Greenwood through the middle, where he was excellent at times last season, and give him a run of games there. Put Bruno Fernandes back in. See if Ronaldo's absence sparks something in Fernandes, who I think for a year at this stage has been, out of form. There's been moments in matches. Clearly, there've been moments in matches, and I was delighted to see Gary Neville call it out, that sort of whinge bag line, because even that night at the Aviva against Ireland, we saw it. Taking off early, walking around, giving out to the referee, bitching and moaning constantly. That's not what you need from a Bruno Fernandes. He's meant to be a leader. He's meant to be someone trying to inspire the players, but he has that permanent look of just disdain at his teammates, who he feels aren't on his level, which is fine maybe when you're doing it week in, week out, as he did for his first year at the club, but the last year just hasn't happened. So I think he needs to figure out a way of getting Bruno Fernandes back involved, motivated. And then do you go and try and sign somebody for 20-25 million over the next month who can fit your system, who has a bit of energy, who can fit the style of play you want? I don't know. There's even Scott McTominay, who gets a very hard time in some ways for Manchester United fans. His lack of discipline just seems to sum up United at the moment. The amount of fouls they give away, silly, loose legs here and there. Throughout that team, there are massive issues. So I think it's an enormous job that is getting bigger by the day when you look at the headlines that are in the papers today, because the players clearly don't seem to think it's on them. They seem to constantly be looking around that dressing room at somebody else, that this is on you, it's not on me. So I to be quite honest, I don't know what the solution for Ralph Rangnick is, and maybe a dropping of Cristiano Ronaldo sets out a message, and maybe it sparks an upturn in results, and suddenly you've got a bit of authority because you've dropped Ronaldo, you're getting results. But looking at the rest of the Manchester United squad and the form that's there, I'm not sure what 11 puts Manchester United on a 6-7 game winning streak at the moment.
Kieran Trippier going to join Newcastle. He's 31, I think 12 million or so, one of the first big signings obviously from how in relation to their quest to stay up. 19 games gone, 11 points. You'd have to say that you'd imagine Newcastle should be able to pull out. It looks a 4-horse race down there, doesn't it, for the bottom three?
It does, but I think with the Premier League at the moment, almost every team has 2 or 3 real quality players who you could see going on a run and doing enough for them to get them out of trouble. And likewise, you wouldn't be surprised if there's a team that suddenly loses 5-6 games in a row and finds themselves dragged back in, a Southampton or Brentford, and suddenly you're right back in that relegation zone. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens at Newcastle over the next month. So Kieran Trippier looks a really impressive signing. Looking at reading the Spanish journalists, can't really understand why Atletico are letting him go. It's been exceptional again this season. There's been a huge success since he went to Spain. There's always a little bit of out of sight, out of mind, but by all accounts is still one of the best right backs around. So it's a good marker for Newcastle to start with, but it does seem that what they thought they might get in January isn't going to happen, because through COVID and through the fact that the other clubs are worried about them, the top 6 want to see them relegated. It would suit them down to the ground if Newcastle relegated, and aren't going to give them their players, even if it does mean that they'll be getting more than they're worth. So are Manchester United going to sell them Jesse Lingard? Possibly not, because if Newcastle stay in the league, maybe they spend 200 million during the summer. Maybe Newcastle over the next couple of years are a threat. Are Liverpool going to settle them a Nat Phillips? At the moment, it doesn't seem like it. So who are the players that come in and spark them? But we've seen time and time again, it takes one player. If they get Dele Alli, if Spurs were to let Dele Alli go, maybe Eddie Howe inspires something in Dele Alli for 6 months, and he scores, like Jesse Lingard at West Ham last year, scores 7 or 8 goals. That's enough, really.
Maybe Ronaldo would work for them, would he? Like the North East.
It wouldn't surprise me at this stage. I'm not sure he would, but he could probably helicopter it in. Michael Owen style.
He could indeed, yeah. Michael Owen, of course.
In that for training.
Yeah, it was more interested in the racing nowadays, become a big owner. But Nathan, just before we get to your team this season, your dad, Micheál, of course, has proper coaching background and pedigree in the kind of the Roscommon Mayo border. You were actually bred to be a coach, effectively.
Oh, pretty much. It's in my blood, Johnny. So picking a team like this comes naturally. And of course, I'm also top coach of the Parkvale under-8s.
Top coach.
Where we're top coach. A top coach. Well, there's 3 of us, so I can't say I'm the lead coach. I'll just say I'm the top coach.
Kind of have there. Like
we're revolutionizing
in the dressing room
football.
there.
We're revolutionizing
How do you deal with the dressing room there of 7-year-olds, in fairness? It's tough going.
I'll tell you. You think that Manchester United dressing room is bad? I'm not sure there's quite as many tiers in the Manchester United dressing room as there is in the Parkvale dressing room if things go horribly, horribly wrong.
Favouritism towards your son?
Of course. Obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously. That's why else would you get involved unless you get a favouritism towards your son. So
beautiful.
Yeah. Let's
talk your
team. It's
team.
Not a half team. It's a team.
Your team of the your half team of the half season, and it's already kind of a slightly boring Premier League in the sense that it's been amazing at times. It looks a bit of a fait accompli at the top, obviously with Man City, but obviously Man City dominating the team. Let's start with your keeper, who is not Man City actually.
No, he's not, and the reason for that is probably that Ederson doesn't have as much to do as anybody else because he has such a strong team in front of them. He probably has more clean sheets at this stage than he has saves. The player I'm going for in goal is Aaron Ramsdale. And I did not think I'd be saying this at the start of the season. He's got 9 clean sheets so far for Arsenal. Only Ederson has more. Still only 23. To be honest, I thought he was a bit of a poser when he came in and haven't watched him at the last couple of seasons when he was relegated both times. As that sort of Jordan Pickford gene in him, but he has a real steeliness as well, and
likes winding up opposition fans as well, which I like.
Which you gotta love. Seems to make a couple of outstanding saves in every game, and just seems at the root of what looks like a new Arsenal. That there is a different attitude, that a nice blend of cockiness, but also backing it up with a toughness as well. And it's hard to see how he doesn't end up as England's goalkeeper at the World Cup by the end of the year. Like, he has transformed that Arsenal back four. You look like you can trust him right now, and I think he's been exceptional so far. The other one who I thought has done really well, and again the last night you saw it with the save at the end, was Jose Sa at Wolves, who came in place of Rui Patricio, who's obviously a hugely experienced keeper, who's ahead of him with the Portuguese national team, has been brilliant so far. But Ederson is probably, alongside Alisson, in the top 2-3 goalkeepers in the world right now. But you can't have every Manchester City player. It's always the problem when you're picking a team like this, of how do you separate the individual from the team brilliance, and in some ways Manchester City maybe get hit by that. And also this season we haven't really had, I remember picking a team of the half season last season, there was 2 or 3 bolters of teams last season with brilliant starts, and you're putting Leeds players in there. That hasn't really happened so far this season, with the exception of West Ham. The top 3 have been well ahead of everybody else, so it's hard to squeeze too many players in that are outside of those 3 teams.
Very briefly, so Dan McDonnell will join me tomorrow, and we are delighted to have Dean Kiley on to talk about this ridiculous wealth of riches that Ireland have. What would you do if you were Caoimhín Kelleher at the moment?
Well, this is why I think the conversation is so interesting, that everybody feels that Caoimhín Kelleher may be the most unlucky Irish goalkeeper of all time. That, he could end up having a fine career but be stuck behind Gavin Bazunu and end up with 25 caps. That this could flip very quickly, because Manchester City could well be looking at Gavin Bazunu and thinking, right, let's bring him back into the fold. Maybe not as number 2, but because Zach Stefan is there as the American goalkeeper, maybe bring him as number 3 and maybe have him around Ederson and try and develop over the next couple of years. And likewise, Liverpool could say, well, the best thing now for Caoimhín Kelleher is to send him out on loan. So we could be sitting in 9 months' time where Kelleher is the one playing every week in the Championship or in League One, and Bazunu is the one who's around Manchester City but not playing. And then suddenly Stephen Kenny has a real decision to make as to, do you stick with Bazunu, who clearly hasn't done anything wrong at all, or do you go with the guy who's in form at club level? So I don't think it's as set in stone as people think, that Kelleher will be the unlucky one. And then you have Mark Travers sitting on the outside playing week in, week out, on the verge of promotion back to the Premier League, thinking, what about me, guys? So it's a very nice complaint for us to have.
You talk a good game, Coach Murphy. Right back, I don't have the stats to hand here, but Trent Alexander-Arnold is effectively not a defender at all. His attacking stats are ridiculous. They're absolutely ridiculous. His ball for Salah for the goal on Sunday just sums up the brilliance of this player. And imagine he was one of the first on the Nathan team sheet, given your attacking style of play as well.
Yeah, and I bet you he'll still be somewhat controversial because there are so many questions over him defensively. He's got 9 assists already this season. He got 14 a couple of seasons ago. He's well on course to surpass that. And he's not the greatest defender in the world.
Who cares?
Well, exactly. The way Liverpool play relies on him being an attacking force. And his mindset is not the mindset of a defender. His mindset is not what might go wrong here and how do I get back to cover. You can tell his mindset is always one of positivity. Might the breaking ball fall in my favour? And even watching back the Chelsea game at the weekend, there was a couple of occasions in the build-up to one of the goals where it looked like it might break down. And his first inclination is always, I'm going to be ready to go rather than be ready to get back. And there's no way he's getting away with that if that's just his thing. Jurgen Klopp clearly wants that. He knows that the value of Trent Alexander-Arnold is in getting the ball. His ball breaks down in and around the halfway line, and he's gone, and he has the quality of passing. Like his range of passing, if we're looking at the Premier League at the moment,
it's obscene.
The best passer in the Premier League.
It's obscene.
Trent Alexander-Arnold is right there, and he's a right back.
But you're talking about right back. When I used to play for Shivan Rovers, where did they put the worst player in the team? Full back, basically. You play because it's the most kind of put him out of position, out of trouble. Do
the least amount of damage.
Do the least amount of damage, like, you know, kind of tuck in for take the post at the corner, that sort of job. It's the most peripheral position on the pitch. Trent Alexander has not only become possibly the best right back in the game, he's redefined the position, completely redefined the position, albeit playing in a Liverpool team, as you saw on Sunday. Graham Gartland spoke about it on commentary, the high line and all that. I mean, it's amazing to watch, and he is just at the centre of everything at right back.
Yeah, he has, and he's one of a few fullbacks that are redefining the game. Like, the position has been totally redefined. There's an expectation at the very best clubs for the fullbacks to do something completely different. You look at what Manchester City do, you look at what Thomas Tuchel does at Chelsea, and I think Reece James has had a brilliant season as well, and maybe better defensively than Alexander-Arnold, but on the ball has nowhere near the quality. Ben Chilwell might have been the best left back in the Premier League until he got injured. So the very best clubs, and it's when you watch Manchester United, it's quite obvious that, you know, in Shaw and Wan-Bissaka, they don't have two players of that quality who can create the amount of chances and get into the positions that those fullbacks at other clubs. And without focusing too much on England, because I know people don't overly care, like the amount of quality right backs England have at the moment. We talked about Trippier coming back, Reece James, Kyle Walker, who might be first choice, Tariq Lamptey, who every time you watch him from Brighton is just outstanding. It's pretty frightening what they have at the moment in that one position. For left back, Johnny, and this guy could have been right back, but he's actually played more games at left back because Manchester City don't have too many options at left back, is João Cancelo, who again has redefined what a fullback can be, because he spends half the time at fullback and he spends half the time in the centre of midfield. Has a brilliant positional sense. I think it's such an important role for Guardiola. I remember being over at City a couple of years ago covering a match, and Danilo was playing at right back, and he was right down in front of us and right down in front of the technical area. And it was basically like watching a puppet. He couldn't do anything without Guardiola telling him to do it. He spent his entire match under the nose of Guardiola. He would, like in a sprinter's position, ready to start, and Guardiola tell him when to go. And he wouldn't go until Guardiola told him when to go. Whereas he doesn't need to do that with Cancelo. Cancelo knows exactly what Pep wants of him, and he knows when to move into midfield. He knows when to step forward. He knows when to cover when they're under a little bit of pressure, as they were at times last week. In one of the matches, he didn't really get forward at all. He just stayed back and did his defensive duty. Again, like Trent Alexander-Arnold, like his range of passing. Think of that pass for Sterling for the goal earlier in the season with the outside of his right boot, when he's playing pretty much in the middle of midfield and he spins it in behind the defence. Cancelo's been up there with the most important players in the Premier League over the last couple of seasons.
It is insane when you think of the quality that Portugal have in that team, that Ireland were so close to winning over there, and a valiant 0-0 draw, which I think arguably probably deserved to actually win the game in terms of that controversial goal that was disallowed as well. Young Rudiger, to paraphrase The Simpsons, we could all learn a bit from young Rudiger, who is centre back with Ruben Dias, which again was, I think this is a fairly explicable duo here.
Yeah, you could make an argument for Aymeric Laporte being in there, maybe alongside Ruben Dias, but Dias seems to never, ever make a mistake. And Rudiger's just been all action. It's still such a surprise that Chelsea, and maybe they are going all out behind the scenes to try and keep Rudiger. It does seem as though he's going to leave during the summer for a huge wage somewhere else, because everything you hear out of Chelsea is that he is the man. He is the alpha male in that dressing room. He's the real leader of that Chelsea team, and he acts it out on the pitch. He's obviously a little bit rash at times, but his ability to step forward, again, he's a proper modern centre half, looks very comfortable on the ball. He's going to be a huge loss for Chelsea when he goes next year. Some of the other ones who I thought have had really good seasons, Ogbena and Zuma at West Ham, both of them got injured. It's such a testament to West Ham that they've still managed to keep going considering the injuries they've had at the back. Matip at Liverpool. Van Dijk was one I've seen in other people's team of the season.
No way.
And I do look at him and go, if you've never seen Van Dijk before and you watch him this season, maybe you would do that. And I think he's definitely on his way back. There have been signs over the past month that he's getting close to his best. But when you think where he was a couple of years ago, he's probably not quite at that level just yet.
I mean, sometimes you underestimate the difficulty in getting over injuries as well. The injury to the extent that he got, and maybe he's 90% of the player he was, which isn't bad. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Obviously not in Nathan's case. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Nathan, this beard is becoming it's really becoming. Did it happen by accident for you, like for many of us, where just shaving became such a chore that just all of a sudden you had a beard without even knowing it?
You see, I've had a beard for about 10 years now. The odd time I just let it go particularly wild. I used to find that when you started growing the beard, it get really, really itchy after about a week, and you just go, it's not worth the hassle. But once you get through that a couple of times, just sort of sinks in. You see, is yours a beard? I don't know if yours is even a beard.
No, not really. It's a bit
of laziness.
It's a bit of laziness. No laziness in this midfield, of course. Declan Rice, Rodri and Conor Gallagher. Let's start with Declan Rice and get it out of the way.
Declan Rice.
What
this
guy?
It's sickening. It is absolutely sickening, Declan Rice. If it wasn't for John Delaney being given free reign of the FAI for 10 years, not capping Declan Rice would be the worst decision in the modern day history of the FAI. Declan Rice would have changed the game for Irish football.
Can we just talk about his performance this season? Because it hasn't happened, so there's no point hypothesizing now. Why is he in your team of the season?
Because every time you watch him, he's just getting better and better and better.
Man United are crying out for him.
I think Rodri's performances mean Manchester City don't need him, but I think any of the other top teams in Europe right now would take Declan Rice. He would be a huge improvement for Manchester United. I think he'd fit into that Liverpool team, no problem. I think he could get into that Chelsea team. I know Chelsea are reluctant to bring him back for the embarrassment of having let him go when he was a kid. He's 150 appearances in the Premier League already. He's only 22. And his ability to get around the pitch. When he first started out, I remember talking to some of the pundits who we'd cover match with, and they weren't quite sure whether he'd ever develop past that sort of what now modern holding midfielder role, nice and tidy and 100 passes a game. None of them go more than 5 yards. He can pass as good as any central midfielder in the Premier League right now. Long range balls out to the full backs. Doesn't take the easy option. Turn in midfield, set off an attack, can dribble. He can do absolutely everything, and also does the defensive side as well. Always seems to be in the right place at the right time. It's scary how good he has got, even over the last year, 18 months, and it's still only 22. He could become, the best midfielder in world football over the next 5 years.
It's lovely to see. Rodri, what a footballer. Yeah, what a footballer. I absolutely love watching him.
Yeah, and has gone on to a totally different level this season. You really sense that Manchester City miss him when he's not there. Last year, Fernandinho came in, or Rodri. It didn't seem to make a huge amount of difference. Manchester City look a far weaker team now when Rodri isn't there, driving things. Again, like Rice, I think takes a few more risks now in the middle of midfield. At first was just simple and let the more talented, more creative players do the business. But I think now he's taken on a lot more responsibility. And that game against Arsenal came at a good time for picking a team and a half season, because he was the best player on the pitch in that game from Manchester City's point of view. And he's still only 25 as well. I think sometimes when we look at players coming in from abroad, you sort of assume they're the finished article when they arrive because a big fee has been spent. He still has his best years to come. And yeah, I think he's probably been Manchester City's most important player this season in a team that's, again, running away with the Premier League title.
Yeah, and it's like when you're talking about somebody running a game, it doesn't exist as much maybe as it did in the Roy Keane days, but he's definitely up there. Conor Gallagher's an interesting one, which obviously not many people would have been watching him week to week. He's on loan, but very good stats as well. Can't say I've seen much from him, but you obviously have. Yeah,
well, I've ended up commentating on Crystal Palace quite a few times this season, and every time you watch him, he impresses. And look, it's a hard decision not to just throw Bernardo Silva in there again and add another Manchester City player. But Palace are one of the stories of the season, considering there were big questions about letting Roy Hodgson go.
Big time.
Stay with the safe option, finish 16th in the league, be happy with that. They brought in Patrick Vieira. They got rid of a lot of the older players, have gone with youth, and are great to watch. Yeah, they're inconsistent, but I wouldn't mind that. If they finish mid-table and they're playing the style of football they're playing, I think most Palace fans will be pretty happy. And like Conor Gallagher's real good enthusiasm for the game. He was at West Brom last year, and he always looked talented, but it was a struggle. They were in a relegation scrap, whereas actually having the bit of freedom at Palace of them playing well seems to suit him down to the ground. And the only question with Gallagher is what happens next. Like, is he good enough for Chelsea? Is he good enough to go back and stake a claim in that Chelsea team? He's been out on loan for the last 3 or 4 years, playing week in, week out. Do you want to go back to Chelsea if you're going to be stuck on the bench for the first couple of months of the season and thinking, can I get out on loan again? He could be in a position where he's playing for England but not been able to get a game at his club. So I think at the moment he looks good enough to go back and certainly be part of that Chelsea squad and be in and around the first 11. He's able to get a goal. He's got 6 goals already this season and seems to have that bit of leadership as well, I think, around that Palace team, even at a very young age, that, he can grab the game by the scruff of the neck. So I wanted to get somebody that wasn't just one of the top 2 or 3 teams in there, and I think Conor Gallagher's probably been best of the rest this season.
No mention of a Man United player even in the picture at all yet, and I don't think this extends to the strikers either.
No, well, who do you put in? Some would say De Gea has been their player of the season. Like, De Gea is a great shot stopper. You still feel as though there's a mistake there from De Gea, and I don't think there's anybody else who you could put in. Ronaldo, 6 weeks ago, maybe you could have made a case for it because of the goals he has scored and the importance of the goals he scored. But this United team have been humiliated at times this season. They've lost 6 of their last 14. I think you'd really struggle to make a case for any Manchester United player to get in that side. Not
a bad front three here, and not a bad balance to your team, I have to say, either. I think this team could function quite okay if Nathan were to become the first Republic of Ireland manager in the 4 divisions at the moment. Mo Salah, this might sound completely insane, but it's only this season I've noticed how good a passer of the ball he is. A lot of the time he's not even looking. He's passing because he's obviously quite a selfish player in the sense that he wants to score goals. His performances this season for me, Nathan, are well up there with Ronaldo and Messi at their best. Like I just cannot get over his production every week, his goals, but also his all-round play. Needed a break, obviously. He got his break in the off-season. Best player in the world at the moment.
It's the quality of goals he scores as well, and can score any goal. Like, he's in the right position for a handy tap-in. He can smash one in from 25, 30 yards out. And like, you think of the goal he scored against Manchester City and then a week later against Watford, where he's in an almost impossible position against some of the best defenders in the world, and he manages to wiggle his way through. And then the quality of his finishing, like the way he can control his left foot and that he can bend his left foot to basically contort to do whatever he wants whenever he wants. You're right. I think his passing has gone to another level. It did feel at the end of last season that there was a breakdown between himself and Mane, and maybe a lack of trust between the two of them. It definitely felt as though there was something going on, but there's been no signs of that at all this season. And like, some of the passing, again, what he can do with the outside of his left boot is right up there with anybody. And Salah's always been a strange player in terms of how people view him, in that the amount of conversations I had over the last few years about Mane and Firmino with Liverpool fans, and they would always make a case for them ahead of Salah almost. But like, the amount of goals he scores speaks for itself. Like, he scored more goals in a single 38-game season than anybody else in the Premier League in his first season, and has got in and around 20 every season since then. Has already got 16 this season. Let's see how many games he misses at the African Cup of Nations, but is well on course to get 30 again. And you're right, I think it's probably between himself and Lewandowski for who is right now the best player in the world.
I was one of the people who was calling out Salah a bit in recent years, because I also thought he just was playing too many games and he needed a break, and that I think that came out in his performances. I think he's completely stepped up a level this year. We've loads of texts coming in. Good stuff, lads. The West's awake this morning. Galva Boo from Aina, Carl, Richard Slaney. Hey lads, Richie here living in the US. Great show. Currently recovering from shoulder surgery and can't sleep. Good luck with that, Richard. Hopefully we'll have that soporific quality that we aim for every morning here in the show. Kelleher should move to a West Ham or Leicester-like team to get some more game time, and that could obviously be on the agenda. Brian Dillon, stop calling him Coach Murphy. He likes it and will want to be called it from now on. Coach Murphy. Richard Redballs, Van Dijk is finished. Look at his job against Chelsea. And shifty lad, Rice would be some centre back, to be honest. He most certainly would.
Well, that's John Giles makes that point all the time, that Rice could easily step back. Now, I would make the point that, like, are you not wasting Declan Rice by putting him at centre half, because he won't be able to have as much of an impact? But maybe, listen, as he gets to, in 7 or 8 years' time, he can nicely just step back and become a sweeper. And
you'll be then managing the under
15s. Under 15. That'll be an easy task, won't it?
So briefly, we have 2 more positions to fill, both of them at Man City. You've gone from Foden and Mahrez.
Yeah, to be honest, it was really hard to decide who to put in. The other contenders were, say, Mikel Antonio, who just seems to have brought his game to another level. So important for West Ham, who've been brilliant this season. Emmanuel Dennis, Watford, scoring goals. I remember watching them in the Champions League for Club Brugge against Real Madrid a couple of years ago and thinking this guy looked the business. And then he did nothing really for 2 or 3 years. So I'm not sure anyone expected him to score the amount of goals for Watford that he has, and he may well keep them in the Premier League. But for Manchester City's dominance, I think they need a couple of players in there. The problem is they rotate so often. Which attacking players do you put in? Like, Raheem Sterling has been brilliant over the last few weeks. Phil Foden's only started 10 games, but he was the best player on the pitch against Liverpool. He was the best player on the pitch against Manchester United. He scored that important goal against Brentford the last night. Like, they're using him when they need to use him. He's obviously had some off-the-field issues in that he went out one night.
Yeah, I mean,
crazy stuff.
Awful. So just before we wrap this up here, who's your assistant manager? We need some sort of yes man.
You want in, Johnny?
Not me. I'm just looking around the off the ball studio. Who do you go for? You've got a lot of very erudite football people there.
Oof.
Ultimately, has to be subservient to Coach Murphy as well, and just say that you're right all along and don't really challenge it.
No, I'd like you, Johnny. I think you'd put the arm around the shoulder.
Your shoulder, bit of good cop, bad cop.
A bit of good cop, bad cop. Yeah, but I think the players would like you. I think you'd have the arm around the players. They'd feel good going out onto the pitch. You wouldn't be the Roy Keane type.
No, I don't.
I'd have you on board, Johnny.
Yeah.
I don't know if there might be questions about turning up to the training ground on time and things like that, and setting a good example. But
yeah, it might be more Cloughy era than sort of Guardiola, I guess. But
go on.
Yeah.
It's Johnny Ward's Cloughy speech.
It's a bit early. We have to go to the ads. Nathan, I think you've done a good job on your team.
I haven't given my last one. Riyad Mahrez. He's the last player.
Mahrez.
He's only started 8 games. Again, he's started less than half games.
Which is kind of mad when you think Mahrez and Foden between them have played how many games in City are 28 points clear or
exactly.
Something?
So between them, they started 18 games in the Premier League this season. He scored in his last 4 starts, Riyad Mahrez. So in this run where they've really kicked on, he's been brilliant. I think actually after Mo Salah, he's the best player in the Premier League. Every time I watch him, his control is out of this world. His ability when Cancelo or Zinchenko, whoever it is, sends one of those 80-yard balls to sort of just take it at his instep. It's outrageous what Riyad Mahrez can do. So I want him in my team of the season every time. No Kevin De Bruyne is always the one, I guess, that people look at.
Just creeping back into form.
Played a huge amount of games. And
yeah,
I still think there's a lot more from De Bruyne. But yes, an outstanding team of the season. Good balance. I think you could work with these guys as well, Johnny.
Not bad, young man. Let's go to the ads.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Are we allowed to enjoy this?
Munster legends Alan Quillan and Niamh Briggs are joining forces to bring you all the latest analysis, news, interviews and so much more.
You stand back and you watch, you can see why these guys are top internationals.
Has he lost the plot here? Or is it just all good fun? I think it's good fun.
The Red 78 with Alan Quillan and Niamh Briggs. Available every Wednesday. Don't miss a moment of action. Subscribe to the rugby channel on the OTB Sports app and turn on your notifications now.
The Leinster and the previous ones, and one of the S&D lads like hit the nail on the head. He's like, because the buzz of being on tour is just unbelievable. And my mom always said it as well when I came home from whether it be a Leinster or an Irish tour in the summer, like she'd give me like 2 or 3 weeks because I was just different. I just like whether I wasn't like low, but it was just you're either carrying on and behaving as you were on tour, like the chat you'd have or whatever way it was. And the SEC fella Paul Ridgen from Wales, he was like, when we're all sitting on the beach on our lovely holidays in about 2 weeks' time, depressed off our heads, we keep the WhatsApp group open and keep the crack going because it's hard to, because you're so highly invested and the emotions are really high and everything's like high intensity, and then you come down. It takes a bit of getting used to. It's definitely like a period where you just have to get through and rev yourself up. But going again the next week after getting knocked out of a big tournament is unbelievably challenging. I find that really, really hard.
With prices from only €289 for fully comprehensive car insurance, everyone's making the jump to getsetgo.ie. New business policies only. Prices subject to minimum premiums. T's and C's apply. MCL Insurance Services Limited Trading is getsetgo.ie is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Before we get to Ross Tierney, Nathan, the Jason Knight to Leeds rumour is one that intrigues me. And we're talking about teams that could potentially get sort of dragged into the race. Leeds have had lots of excuses this season. At the same time, they've only 19 points, 8 ahead of Newcastle, for example. Knight to come into the Bielsa regime would be a fascinating one.
Yeah, it's the sort of move you'd love to see Jason Knight make, because Leeds are still a huge club. It comes with a lot of pressure, I think, all the time playing for Leeds. And yeah, they are in a relegation scrap. I would hope they'd be fine. I think the excuses are legitimate excuses. They've missed their 2 best players for pretty much all the season in Patrick Bamford and Calvin Phillips. Now, Phillips is probably not going to play a huge amount again, which would be a worry. But Jason Knight, it does seem as though something is going to happen. He's been linked with any amount of clubs, and like Bielsa is one of the most interesting coaches in world football. He plays a thoroughly modern brand that if you want to go and play for one of the best clubs in the world, I think you need to be able to play that way now. That real high intensity, non-stop, pressing high, putting your opposite number under real pressure every time he's on the ball. But then when you get it, being able to move it on quickly. Like the speed that Leeds play at when they're at their best is as good as anybody in the Premier League. So I think for Jason Knight to get an opportunity to be exposed to that at a huge club, like that's probably as good a move as you could wish for Jason Knight right now.
Say if you're the Motherwell manager, start of the season, Graham Alexander is you're Graham Alexander. What do you say to young Ross Tierney when you're giving him his debut? Is he a good lad?
Well, I'm saying don't go on doing interviews with Johnny Ward for starters. he'll bring you down a bad road.
Good morning, Ross.
Good morning.
What's going on?
Not too bad.
Are you ready for action, or what's when is this Motherwell, the much anticipated Motherwell debut, going to start for you?
Well, our next game is on the 18th of January, and I'm currently in isolation with COVID, so not a great start, I would say.
How do you feel?
I feel grand, just feel a bit tired, but then like if I don't go to sleep I get a burst of energy, so it's weird though.
And you have 2 young kids as well, so obviously as a young parent the challenge is to restrict COVID to yourself as well.
Yeah, so thankfully they've all tested negative, so it's just my friends, they've tested positive, and a few lads off the team. But no, 2 lads that my friends that didn't test positive are the only 2 lads in the group that have the booster, so must be working.
There you go. So what's happened since you left Bowes?
Not much really. I've signed for Motherwell. I've enjoyed my time off. I've enjoyed my time at Bowes, but no, I came over on the 12th of December, I think, and I trained for a week with the lads, just to get to know the lads, and yeah, I enjoyed it. And now I came back on Sunday, the 2nd, and thought I was ready to go on Monday, but COVID struck. So,
Ross, in terms of possibilities of where you might have gone after Bowes, or maybe even staying at Bowes, can you talk us through those last few weeks and contract negotiations and the options that were on the table for you?
Yeah, look, the deal wanted to get done in summer, but unfortunately things didn't click and didn't go. I stayed to the end of the season, thankfully, and unfortunately we didn't win that. But we got Europe. But it was a great season, personally and collectively. Like, we made great memories and we had a good run in Europe, so that was unbelievable. But yeah, I sort of not had options, but I had interest from England and other places in Scotland, but they were more 23s and sometimes on the bench on first team, like more money, obviously. Like, Motherwell's not a big budget, but I'm happy with the money I'm on, to be honest. It's paying bills and but I just took into account that I'm still only 20, so I'm a young lad, and it was 26, 27 maybe I'd be looking at money-wise, but I'm looking just to progress my career, and thankfully Motherwell said I'd be in around the first team and I'll be a first team player, so I'm glad.
The extra 6 months you ended up spending at Bows, do you feel a better player for those 6 months and playing regularly?
Oh yeah, 100%. Look, we were playing at a high level. People don't understand how intense and how good of a level the Irish League is. Like, but yeah, I felt like I just needed to play last year. Like I said at the start of the season, I was planning on going out on loan. Thankfully, I broke into the team, and I played regularly. Me and Georgie just had a good partnership. So yeah, I enjoyed my time at Bows.
Yeah, when we get to the papers, plenty of chat about Georgie Kelly from Aidan Fitzmaurice and the Endo today in terms of where he might go, and some very interesting options mentioned. But Rory O'Connor, who's a Bows fan, was on yesterday. He was so sad, obviously, to see all these Bows players go, including you, Ross. But one of the main, I suppose, tenets of our chat was this influx of players from Ireland to the SPL. Why do you think this is happening? Is it to do with what happened with Jamie McGrath, his subsequent progression to the Irish team? Obviously, Liam Scales getting massive kudos at Celtic as well. What appeals to Irish players to go to the SPL?
Well, it's not the weather anyways. I'm not sure. Like, obviously, I think Jamie was probably one of the first lads that came from the League of Ireland to the SPFL, and I think he's done well and people can see his quality. So I think a lot more teams, not even just in Scotland and England as well, are starting to look to the League of Ireland because they realise the quality that is in the league now. And I think Brexit has helped as well with that because obviously it'd be 18 to go. So the younger lads now are not going over 16 and then falling off when they're 21. They're going through the ranks in 17s and 19s back home, and then they get the chance in the men's senior team. So I think it's great for the League of Ireland as well, especially financially. But interested me. It was just playing first team and taking another step in the right direction. And so I don't know. Like, obviously, Johnny Kenny, there's talks of him signing for Celtic, and Darragh Burns was supposed to come over, but I don't know what's going on there. But for me, like, obviously, I obviously knew Jamie McGrath playing from the fucking playing from the senior Irish team, so that was also an interest. Like, you would think St Mirren are a big club, but he's a regular in the Irish senior men's team. So as me as playing 21s, like, that was obviously a push for me, and I knew that if I'm playing here regularly and playing well, that I could get the chance soon and might be able to do what Jay done.
Yeah, and the lad who's struggling to sleep with the shoulder injury, Ross, has just woken him up there again. But I think Ross is going to wake up a few people with his SPL forms next season. This was a really interesting thing, I thought, yesterday. Kenny Shields, a former Derry manager, was quoted as saying that he thinks some of the teams in the SPL play a style of football that actually isn't suiting, for example, the likes of Aaron McAniff at Hearts. Now, I would notice of late, just watching some games, the pitches wouldn't be great compared to maybe the summer football in Ireland. What are your preconceptions about the style of football going over there at the sort of lower half of the SPL, Ross?
Well, look, it's obviously not the biggest league in the world. Maybe take Celtic and Rangers out, but no, with the last Motherwell, like, there's quality everywhere in the team, and like, the standard is what I expected, to be fair. Like, I just came in with hopes, but the standard back home that we had, like, it's high. Like, so I'm not in deep water, and obviously Jamie McGrath can show that the talent in the league was there. So
you've mentioned that a couple of times, Ross, about the standard at home, and you know, you look at if for example, I've made this point for if Rovers play Derry next season, you'll have Jack Byrne, Dylan Watts, Danny Mandrew, Graham Burke against Patrick McElhenney, Will Patching, and you know, McElhenney, to name but three. The standard in the League of Ireland, from your perspective, having played under 21s and gone over to Scotland, you obviously have a high regard for it.
Yeah, look, all you have to do is look at our finish in the table, and then look how well we done in Europe against big teams. Like, I didn't really take it and look at it until I left and realised, like, playing against top teams in Europe, and we beat top teams. Like, we beat PAOK in the Aviva, like, you know me? So, like, the talent back home, and it's great. Like, you look at the senior men's team, you think how many players have come from the League of Ireland, and look how well we're doing now, and obviously the next League of Ireland manager. So it's great. Like, so it's gone the right direction, thankfully.
Yeah, I think the bit that still seems to be missing is getting the full value for players. Like you mentioned, PAOK. I think of Christos Cholas, who came off the bench for PAOK in that match, who ends up signing for Norwich for 10 million. And he's not even starting for PAOK in that game. Whereas, unfortunately, the money that's coming in for League of Ireland players is obviously a million miles away from that. In terms of the move to Scotland, like, you're still a very young guy, as you say. You know, you're not going over at 16, but you're still an under 21 player, and you know, you've been very honest, I think, over the last year about, you know, some of the difficulties in your personal life and that. Had you any concerns about moving away from home? And have you seen a sign that Motherwell is a good club for making you feel at home in Scotland? I know it's not a million miles away, but it's still you know, it's a flight home, and it's in COVID times. It's not quite as easy as it once would have been.
No, look, for me, obviously, I didn't get the chance to go away when I was 16 or 17. Then I played at both 17s, 19s, and then senior team. But so I always still, every little boy's dream is to become a professional footballer. So I was coming over excited, a new challenge, and getting to live my dream, and moving to a different country didn't really bother me, because my girlfriend and 2 kids are going to come soon enough anyway. So, well, I'm settling in myself, and the lads are all great with me. So it's not much different to back home in terms of weather-wise and the lads and the crack. But no, for me, it's just living my dream, and I'm just excited to get going. So, yeah.
Do you have Ireland ambitions now? Because I don't know, when Jamie McGrath went over, and I'm not putting Jamie down here, but I think people would have been surprised that he ended up being an Ireland regular, and a thoroughly justified Ireland regular. The position you're in maybe is, I'm not saying you're going to start for Ireland anytime soon, but it might be a little bit up for grabs in the near future in terms of the 10 position, or at least competition for places. What are your ambitions in that regard? Because you've done so well with the 21s as well, having scored last year.
Yes. Going to concentrate on Motherwell, to be perfectly honest with you, but meet up with the lads hopefully if I get in the squad for March. But no, look, I haven't even thought about senior call up or anything like that, but I know that if I play well for a couple of years here, that chance might come around. And obviously you can see with the manager we have now and Stephen, that he give that chance to young lads. He's not afraid to give that chance, and like, you can see that with Jason Knight and Almeida and Troy Parada, and even Gav Bazuno and Andrew, like, to name a few. Like, a lot of lads that have played 21s last year are regulars now in the senior team. So, like, we know the opportunity is there.
Would you have got that sense, Ross, around the Ireland under-21 camp, that there's a feeling there's not a big gap between that 21 squad and the senior squad now? Because, you know, you look at the more experienced 21s, the likes of Conor Coventry or Gavin Kilkenny, it doesn't feel as though they're a world away from the senior squad. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see Gavin Kilkenny starting for the senior squad by the end of this year.
Obviously, Gav's doing brilliant at Bournemouth, and the team is doing well, and they look like they're going to get promoted to the Prem. So, in terms of that, like, you don't even have to just look at them lads. Like, you just look at the 21s, that the amount of people that are actually starting first team in the Championship and League One, like, yeah, Will Smallbone that was starting in the Prem. So, like, there's a lot of players in 21s, not even just Gav and Cov, that have that aren't a million miles away from the first team. Like, I don't think I include myself in that if the likes of Troy and Jaso wasn't in the senior team, that we probably wouldn't get a call up to 21 Jimmy. So I think in the past that I don't think we had enough young lads in the first team that gave the 21s the chance to be that strong as it is now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we've Ev Ferguson on the bench for Brighton now, and like, he's in 21s and he'll be there for now a couple of years unless he goes straight to the first team, which wouldn't surprise me. But now, like, I enjoy being the lads every camp, and we have new players come in, and they've all just done well. And we have a tight group, and yeah, it's just, hopefully, I'm not really thinking about first senior call, but more thinking about Motherwell and the 18th against Ross County.
Yeah, that's probably important. You mentioned Evan Ferguson, one of the many players come through St. Kevin's. We have a photo here that you actually introduced to me, Ross, there around the time of the PFAI Awards. This is an absolute perler of a photo. Can you name? Well, obviously you can, because it's Danny Mandrew on the right. Who's on the left? Would you know, Nathan?
I can't even see the photo, Johnny, so I would most definitely be guessing.
Just say Ross Tierney.
Ross Tierney, looking good, Ross.
Yeah, Ross, you're small in stature compared to Big Dan.
I've always been small in stature, but I've always like, when I was playing back home with my brother, like, he wouldn't go easy on me, so I was always used to playing with bigger lads. So you could see that on the pitch, that with no fear. But yeah, look, it was great. I think that was after the AA Sports Cup when we played Cork. We beat them 2-0 or 2-1.
What age are you?
I was 18 at the time. I was about to do my leaving cert.
Yeah, like, if of all the League of Ireland players who may make that push into the senior squad, Mandrew must be right up there. I know it was highly controversial he wasn't in the PFAI Team of the Year, but in any event, you imagine it's a big year for him playing alongside Jack Byrne as well.
Yeah, well, how would you feel? Like, obviously I don't really worry about what's going on at Rovers, but like, their manager has a tough job in his hands, like, with the amount of failures he has.
Yeah.
Like that. But no, Danny's probably the best player I've played with, but his quality is just unbelievable. And you can just see when he's not feeling the things he does, you're just in awe of him. But yeah, I give him a few hits here and there, but he's a good lad.
Two good kids from Ballymun. Just finally, what are the aspirations for Motherwell? You're flying it in the table this season. What is the hope before the end of the campaign once you get into the team, hopefully?
Well, obviously I haven't been in long enough to talk with the lads or talk with the gaffer about my ambitions, but obviously my ambitions are just to get into the team. I'm obviously coming in January. We've only half season left, so hopefully I can just hit the ground running. And team ambitions, like, obviously we want to get Europe. Like, I think we're doing well now, but yeah, I think we'd like to qualify for Europe and get a good run in the cup. So hopefully I can help the lads.
Celtic at home on the 6th of February is a nice little target.
It is, obviously, like, I'm a big Celtic fan, as most Irish lads are, but I think my dad's more interested in the Celtic game than watching me do well. He hasn't stopped talking about that. He's like, it's not how you're getting on, Ross. Are you settling well? It's like, yeah, I'll get things for the Celtic game.
I can already envisage you giving Liam Scales a kick.
Scales is a good lad. I've got a few kicks off Scales in the derbies, but no.
Just to clarify before you go, our producer Tommy Rooney, in case there were any confusion, you were not 18 in that photo with Danny Mandrew. What age were you roughly in that photo? I hope it wasn't 18.
Oh, the little one?
Yeah.
I was talking about the one me and Danny after the Jesus, that one I would have been. I think that was the year Danny was going to Brighton.
Wow.
So I think he went to when he was 17. I would have been about 13, 14.
That would make a little bit more sense, because you look particularly fresh-faced for an 18-year-old. And I think for all about me trying to get into Barrett's back in the day, you weren't getting into any nightclubs looking like that anyway.
No, that was actually, it's mad to think that would have been 4 years later. That would have been only. Jesus, I grew up all right, didn't I?
You certainly did.
Danny's still a handsome man.
He's a handsome man and not afraid to show it off on Instagram either. But there's nothing wrong with that. Great to talk to you, Ross, and hope you're back on your feet very soon.
Perfect, thank you.
Nathan, I've been a massive fan of him for a while, but he's again just grown as a player.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how he gets on. And like Jamie McGrath's obviously an inspiration to all those players going over, because as you say, going to St. Mirren, not a really renowned club for providing international players, and you look at him now, if he's not in the Ireland starting 11, he's player 12 or 13 around the starting 11. So like it's a real good ambition for Ross to have over the next couple of years to try and make his way through, and obviously he's done a good job with the 21s already. So yeah, can't wait to see how he gets on over the next little while, and how many of those Irish players, because he may not be the last to go over the next few weeks to Scotland.
Definitely not, and I think there's a definitely renewed interest in the SPL in Ireland now with all these players going over, and Jamie McGrath and obviously Conor Rowan at St. Mirren, and I don't know, Ross is one of these players. I know like everyone now they have the GPS data, so these kind of lazy number 10s can't get away with not doing that much running anymore, but Ross was just from another era anyway. He's pestering off the ball is a joy to behold. I think he's a manager's dream, and really wish him the best, St. Mirren. We'll get to the papers now. Plenty to get through today. This is the Irish Times. Settled Roundtree happy to commit future to Munster. We spoke to Ron O'Gara yesterday about Munster. Unfortunately, Ireland Six Nations games dominate Virgin viewing figures. Unfortunately, nervous month awaits as COVID threatens to disrupt Six Nations. And this is a feature also on the Indo. Six Nations to start behind closed doors. The headline might be jumping the gun a small bit. It's more that they're kind of preparing for the possibility of that. And knee injury puts Mannion up against the clock to make the Leinster final, and that's Crokes against Naas in a fascinating game, 5 o'clock on Saturday. Irish Examiner, Cathal Dennehy on long-term value of sporting memories will far outweigh the cost, and that's Cathal on the back page talking about running as well. And I have to say I like this story, Nathan, why Emlyn Mulligan is back in the Leitrim fold. We spoke to Cathal Mullaney yesterday about the game in the Dome between Mayo and between Leitrim and Sligo, but it's lovely to see the revival in Leitrim, and obviously our man at the helm as well, former Roscommon League player actually indeed.
And some would have said Andy Moore was a far better soccer player when he was about 15, 16.
Quality football. I played under
Gaelic
14 with him, I think. Yeah, quality soccer player.
But yeah, look, it's great to see Emlyn Mulligan back. He's one of those players that everyone has always felt a touch of sympathy for, that because he was from one of the smaller counties, never got the opportunities to show his skill set on the very biggest stage. I remember about 4 or 5 years ago with him on, he'd never played at Croke Park at that stage ever. I think there has to be some sort of an opportunity for players like that. So it looked as though his intercounty career was over, but obviously Andy Moore has come in. There's a buzz around the place in Leitrim. It's such a shame, I think, for a county like Leitrim that the Proposal B didn't go through and that they're not getting a proper championship, because they play London first up at like the third week in April, and then the winners of that play Mayo or Galway, and like that's their Connacht championship over, regardless of how well Andy Moore does. Because
like Leitrim against, I didn't watch the game the other night, but Leitrim against Sligo is actually entertaining when you get teams that are like the standard of Gaelic football, even at the lower level, is good at the moment. So if you were to, they're very well in great physical shape. If you could have some sort of a system where you had a junior championship or even more of a league based system, and it would be a big deal for Emlyn Mulligan to take on Sligo and win and bring some pride to Carrick-on-Shannon. What's wrong with that instead of getting beaten by 60 points against Mayo?
Well, I think it's incredible that we got to the second morning of January before we got into GEA structures conversation. It looks as though something is going to happen, and that the Proposal B, the momentum that was behind it, something will change over the next year or two that allows that to happen. The other thing that stood out from that Sligo-Leitrim game, and I only saw the highlights, was that it was a game at the beginning of January being played indoors. Obviously, it made history. It was in the Dome. Just outside Ballyhonus. We now have the finest GEA structure in the entire country down west. But because the conditions were absolutely perfect, like the scoring was free flowing, the quality of football was brilliant, that, often these pre-season comps are played in absolute muck and wind and rain and nobody cares about them. Whereas you watch that game the last night, you think this is, I get two evenly matched teams. I could watch this. I could enjoy this. So I don't know if we're going to see too many more domes built around the country, but there's certainly a use for them.
Yeah, and there's one of the lads in one of the WhatsApp groups he goes, I'm not going to name the player, but he was talking to a very, very high profile Gaelic Games player about it. He was saying everyone goes out thinking they'll hit the roof, no bother, but nobody can get near it. Apparently that's the big challenge now when you get into the dome. Try to hit the roof.
Try and hit the roof, yeah. I presume with a Schlitter you could probably hit the roof. Yeah, going back to Midas nightclub in Ballyhonus, we did in the 90s have the great entertainment venue of the West, and now thanks to the dome we have the greatest entertainment venue in the West in Ballyhonus once again. Slightly different type of entertainment, but
yeah, you know. And yet again I'm going to make that really, really poor joke about Nathan having the Midas touch. There we go, just made it there. Martin Breheny, GAA have made a huge mistake with fixtures at the back of the hurl, and again more stuff about the Six Nations, the back of the Times London edition. We'll talk to Colm Boohig about this. Novak, no problem. 9 times champion Djokovic given medical exemption to defend his title at the Australian Open. Ericsson Eyes World Cup, Nathan, how lovely would that be?
I think everybody would love to see Christian Eriksen find a way to go to the World Cup finals with a Denmark team who are just flourishing. Ever since they got through the drudgery of having to play Ireland every couple of months, they have kicked on with their, they went through a revolution. They decided they had a good manager who was bringing them a reasonable amount of success qualifying for tournaments, but the football was dull as dishwater. Brought in a new manager, attacking, free-flowing, modern style of play, and even with the loss of Christian Eriksen, have gone through World Cup qualifying, flew through it, winning all their matches. And if they can add Eriksen on top of that, even as an impact player off the bench, Denmark can go and have a very good World Cup. It'll be one of the stories of the World Cup, one of the few good news stories at the World Cup in Qatar, if Christian Eriksen can find his way onto the pitch.
And you do feel that all of the difficulties that Eriksen has come through and all those challenges ahead, if there's one thing he needs, it's Coach Murphy. You can just feel it. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Somehow I'm actually interested in your under-9s team now, or your under-8s team.
Well, I'm thinking, Johnny, what we need is a fly-on-the-wall documentary, and you could come up and give a little rousing team talk at some stage. We the under-8s played the Shamrock Rovers under-8s. I was away this week, unfortunately. Oh, wow. So my two fellow coaches took charge, but they both said they had never seen anything like the Shamrock Rovers under-8s. Now, we're a very small sort of community team, so we got a real mix of players, and they were just delighted to go up and play against Shamrock Rovers, who are the best team probably in the country at that level. But they said the level of organisation, passing, picking the right ball at the right time.
Sorry, under-8s?
Under-8s, yes.
And Stephen Bradley's spoken about this, that he, some people said the underage national leagues are too old, starting at 13, which now they're 14. Stephen Bradley said it's much too late. And I'm also kind of wondering, like, how young is too young as well? And you talk about organisation of under-8,
yeah, and these are clearly very talented players, and I would agree with that. Like, how young is too young to be organised, and also how young is too young to be that good and that dominant. In that,
it wasn't a problem for us.
Too easy. No, that's for sure. Can it become too easy for you too quickly when nobody can get near you at that age? But yeah, they by all accounts looked to be a different breed. All right, and I think that question continues up to under 13, under 15. Are you missing out on a lot of players if you're a scout? And I'm sure some of them are looking at under-8s teams for early potential. Are you looking around the country, or do you just go, I'll just go to Shamrock Rovers because I know they have the best of the best already? But look, they're clearly doing something right, and the players at that age clearly enjoy being that good and are that good. So yeah, it's it's such a difficult balance to get between getting the best players on the pitch together all the time while trying to keep it fun for them and for everybody else that they play against and play alongside, and the players aren't left behind. It's like that. That's the biggest difficulty with underage football, Johnny.
Yeah,
in Dublin.
I remember being thrown into the under 13s as a 9-year-old for Shivan against Roscommon Town. The jersey is basically down to your toes.
I presume that's not because you were a child genius.
No,
they literally didn't.
No, we needed players and got absolutely hammered, as we always did against Roscommon Town. Very, very briefly, Toxic United. That's the back of the Mail. The rest of the tabloids basically all on the Man United team, which will be obviously part of the narrative ahead of the Villa game, which I believe is early next week. Will O'Callaghan has the sports news. Good morning, Will.
Morning, lads. How you getting on?
What's going on?
That's plenty. I mean, you've got the League Cup semi-final coming up this evening. London rivals Chelsea and Tottenham. A certain Romelu Lukaku back in the Chelsea squad after his apology, including the video which went up on Chelsea's social media accounts last night. He was dropped for the Premier League draw, you'll remember, against Liverpool on Sunday, following that pretty controversial interview with Sky Italia, where he said he wasn't happy at the European champions and that he would like to go back to Inter Milan. Now, Lukaku has since apologised, and boss Thomas Tuchel hopes that the fans at Stamford Bridge will be able to forgive him.
He's very aware of what happened and what he created, and he is he feels the responsibility to clean the mess up. Maybe we will have a bit of smell still from it, of course. He can handle it. He has. There's also no other choice. He cannot expect now everybody to be super happy the very next day. But he is still our player, and we have good reasons and a lot of reasons to make him play for us and to convince him and to fight hard that he is our player. We are happy that he's our player, and we will protect him.
Lukaku there back for Chelsea, lads. Spurs could be without a couple of players because of COVID. They're awaiting the results of PCR tests, while the EFL are yet to make a decision on Liverpool's request to postpone tomorrow's League Cup semi-final. They're due to play Arsenal in the first leg of that tie, but further cases of COVID-19 within the Red squad. Manager Jurgen Klopp and three of his players, Alisson, Roberto Firmino and Joel Matip, were all absent from that 2-2 draw against Chelsea at the weekend because of coronavirus. A further round of testing found more cases within the first team bubble, forcing them to cancel yesterday's training session. Meanwhile, Kieran Trippier will undergo a medical at Newcastle today ahead of a proposed £12 million transfer from Atletico Madrid. The right back will become the Premier League club's first signing since their takeover by Saudi owners. Trippier helped Atletico to win the Spanish title last season and was part of the England side that reached the Euro 2020 final in the summer just gone, and he previously played under Eddie Howe at Burnley. Southampton's new owners have been warning their fans not to expect a revolution following their takeover by the investment firm Sport Republic. The Premier League club is the group's first acquisition, with them aiming to build a portfolio of sporting assets across the world. They're led by the Serbian-born cable television tycoon Dragan Solak, and the former Brentford director Rasmus Ankerson is also involved. As you mentioned, on the back of some of the newspapers, including The Independent and The Herald today, Kilmacud Crokes forward Paul Mannion now a major fitness doubt for their Leinster club football final against Naas at Croke Park this Saturday. The three-time All-Star forward has been unable to train since he picked up a knee injury in last month's semi-final victory against Port Arlington. The Kilmacud boss Robbie Brennan says that Mannion has not suffered ligament damage, but admits he's facing a race to be fit for the decider. A story that's been running either side of the Irish Sea today. The organisers of the Six Nations considering playing some of the matches at this year's tournament behind closed doors if the COVID-19 situation doesn't improve. They've been holding talks with the six unions about contingency plans to potentially allow games to go ahead without supporters instead of postponing the fixtures. There's not much room in the calendar if they were to look to refix them. England is the only competing nation without crowd restrictions currently in place, while Ireland are due to play 3 home games in the competition this season. Restrictions on crowds in Ireland are in theory in place until the end of this month, with the tournament set to get underway on the first week of February. And I know you're going to be talking to Colm Boohig about this in a moment, but the Australian Open organisers insisting this morning that Novak Djokovic didn't get special treatment in being granted a medical exemption to play. The world number one will defend his title in Melbourne this month after receiving an exemption to participate just before he travelled. All players at the first Grand Slam of the year have to be either vaccinated against COVID-19 or given that exemption on medical grounds. The Australian Open chief Craig Tilley's been speaking this morning to 9 News in Australia. He said 26 players in all sought exemptions. Not all of them were granted, and he insists there was no special favours for the Serbian 9-time champion at the event. There's been plenty of criticism in Australia in the last 24 hours about that decision to allow Djokovic to travel to Melbourne after they've endured a series of lockdowns in recent months in Victoria.
That was an incredibly smooth news round from Will. Thank you, Will.
Thank you, lads.
Yeah, Colm Boohig is joining us next to talk tennis, as Will alluded to there, the Djokovic situation. But first, here's Caitlin Thompson of Racket Magazine. She spoke to Joe last night about the vaccine exemption received by Djokovic to go to the Aussie Open.
It's difficult for us to fully appreciate the extent to which he is a god in his home country. Mm-hmm. His approval rating is 100%.
Explains a lot, actually, about him and why he... There's a very funny documentary about Metallica starring, obviously, tennis prodigy, famous drummer Lars Ulrich, talking to his dad, who happened to be one of the greatest Danish tennis players of all time and a jazz clarinetist and an artist and all this stuff. And he's listening to one of their albums and he looks at him and he goes, I think you are in, how do you say, like an echo chamber. And I think about that all the time with regards to Novak Djokovic, because this guy is the most famous Serb ever. Yeah. He represents this post-Yugoslav splitting up, children of war, made good redemption story. He's fabulously rich. He's fabulously famous and,
and talented and brilliant.
Clearly and talented and the greatest tennis player, possibly, at least on the men's side, that we've seen ever in terms of results. He's going to be the president of Serbia if he wants to be, and many, many people think he's going to be. I also think, having spent a little bit of time understanding that region, working on a documentary film about, the mass rapes in Foča, for example, and the Bosniak, Serbian, Croat conflict, they really function well when they feel like they are embittered and embattled. And I think there's a lot of that mentality that goes on with him, where he thinks, this is me against the world. We have to prove yet again. Nobody wants to believe in us, and here we are, discounted and underdog. And you guys hate Nadal. You guys hate Djokovic because you love Nadal and Federer, even if that's not true. Even if nobody, everyone has sort of moved on from those folks. And I think there's really a lot to that specific context in which he's operating, where he is a god king, and he's possibly in a bit of an echo chamber, because he is not hearing, at least from the kind of agents or PR people who anybody else would say, you know what, maybe just don't say that out loud. Maybe don't post an Instagram picture about how you got a medical exemption. Maybe don't fan these flames. You don't need to. Your tennis speaks for itself, so just keep winning and shut everybody up that way. But he can't.
Yeah, Jim Dimp on YouTube. Six Nations to be held in the Connacht Dome. That'd be a bit of crack, Nathan.
Yeah, would you hit the roof? Would Johnny Sexton hit the roof? Does remind me of being at the Millennium Stadium around the 2015 World Cup. I was in watching the All Blacks train one day, and the skill set of the All Blacks, and Dan Carter was basically trying to hit the roof of the Millennium Stadium, wasn't able to do it. But the task for the props basically was he would kick it to try and hit the roof, and they would have to catch the ball, which was quite difficult, but they had no problem doing it.
When you say hit the roof, the noisiest sporting event you've ever been at atmosphere-wise?
Well, the Millennium Stadium's up there because when the roof is closed, the atmosphere is insane. Constantly, I'll have to have a think about that. Like, we can come back to it. Big Premier League games, I guess that the atmosphere is. I prefer more an intense atmosphere than necessarily a noisy atmosphere.
Okay, yeah. Well, you mentioned
What's yours, Johnny? You obviously have something in mind.
I'd honestly say a friendly game, Galatasaray and Fiorentina in Istanbul. Yeah. It was just a friendly game. It was just, this is a completely different level. But then again, Galway and Waterford in the All-Ireland final, or any good All-Ireland final, is probably right up there. But we mentioned, we heard about the Serbs there, and obviously thoughts go back to one Serb hitting the ass of another Serb to give Ireland an equalising goal in Lansdowne Road, and good atmosphere that night as well. But one Serb was in the news, and there's a beautiful symmetry to this, because Colm Boohig joins us now. Colm Boohig is actually in a rush to get through this because he's off to get his booster jab very, very shortly after this little segment of the show, which is about Novak Djokovic, who for whatever reason, Colm, is not doing this but will be going to the Australian Open. Good morning to you.
Johnny AM Wards and Uja Roy, how are you? Thanks for revealing my medical private history there.
Yeah, I just consulted with Tommy just to see if it were okay, but I mean, is anyone...
Yeah, you consulted with Tommy. If
I'm any good...
What's taking you so long?
What?
You literally can't get rid of the boosters.
Well, I have private reasons for that. I feel huge sympathy for Novak all of a sudden. I can see it now.
What are your private reasons for waiting so long?
People probing your personal life constantly.
I'll tell you privately, lads. Yeah, we'll have a great chat.
Jeez, I'm
off the ball behind the scenes. No, I really do have to go though.
So. You really do have to go, yeah. So we've about 6 minutes. What's going on with Djokovic? Why is he getting an exemption? Is this the rich being favoured over the poor? Talk to me.
Well, you could argue that definitely one side of it, but Craig Thiele, the Tennis Australia chief, has said it's a rigorous, independent panel. There's two panels, and it's full of medical expertise. It's set up in conjunction with the Victorian government, and Djokovic was among 26 others who applied for this medical exemption out of 3,000 players and staff in total that would be participating in the Australian Open. And Djokovic was one of the handful that passed the medical exemption rules, which could be a cardiac illness in the last 3 months. It could be an acute illness overall. It could be a reaction to a previous vaccine. Or probably most interestingly, it could be if you contracted COVID within the last 6 months, then you don't have to get a vaccination and you can play. So
is that not by far and away the most likely scenario here?
It is. And I mean, look, the thing is, this wouldn't even be a segment now if Djokovic just came out and said, look, this is the reason I can play. But he's not going to do that. And it's never been in his nature to really disclose that information. You know, he always holds back a bit. I mean, Djokovic, he's such a polarizing figure and he has a really partisan crowd on his side. Like, look at any comment section on YouTube videos with Djokovic in the title. And there are crazy supporters of Djokovic. You can say no wrong about him. And the one thing about it that I find so fascinating is that for a guy who wants to be loved so much, he goes about it in a very funny way, because he goes up to the field and he's about to go on the pitch and he's like, no, I'll leave it. In that he seems like he's doing everything right to follow the PR of Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal. And then just when you say, all right, take it to that extra level, he turns around and goes away, and he doesn't, like in this case, disclose the information that everybody wants to hear. And like, the reason obviously that this is so controversial is that Melbourne is the most locked down city cumulatively since COVID began. Their cases are skyrocketing at the moment. I'm talking to a friend of mine who lives over there, and he says like there's so much anger about this. And for me, like, it was a bit predictable. And I was thinking, what's Djokovic going to do here? Because this is by far his favourite tournament. Like, he's won 20 Grand Slams, 9 of those 20 are in the Australian Open, and he's won the last 3 Australian Opens. And of course, the big thing at the moment is he's tied on 20 with Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer. So he really wants to play at the Australian Open, but he pulled out of the ATP Cup this month with Serbia. That was held in Sydney. And then people are getting, Jesus, I wonder, is he actually not going to play because of this vaccination rule? But I was thinking to myself, if he wants anyway, he's going to play. They're going to let him play. And all like this whole thing would end, the whole speculation about it, if they just came out and said, or if he came out and said, look, this is the reason I'm allowed to play.
Well,
but we're thinking do that, and we're never going to know.
We're thinking of Callum Robinson here, but is he going to be absolutely badgered in interviews now? What is it? What is it?
Totally, yeah. But you know what he does? Because he's been badgered about this for 2 years, lads. Like, because everybody knows that he's vaccine hesitant, I think is a diplomatic way to put it.
Not our Colm.
And he comes, not like me now, Danny, no. So he'll come out and see what he says. You could say it's kind of smart, but it's the way he puts it anyway, is that he's not against vaccination. He's pro-freedom, pro-choice. And that's the way he's going to spin this. So I think what he'll do, like, it's a week and a half to go, lads, till this Australian Open starts, a long way to go. I think what he'll do is he'll say, look, it's I'm pro-choice, you know, whatever people want to do. And I applied for a medical exemption. I got a medical exemption. I don't have to disclose my medical history, which he's absolutely right in doing. So he doesn't want to go on with you, Johnny, but he's absolutely right in saying that he doesn't have to say any of this. So we're never going to know the reasons for this. The only way that this will escalate further is that the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, has come out and said, look, Djokovic has to prove why he's not being vaccinated. And he might do that, and we may never know about it. Or on the other side, the most extreme measure taken here is that Djokovic could be kicked back out of the country if he can't sufficiently prove why he has received this exemption. And I don't think that's going to happen, because the other point about this too is last year there was a 5-day circuit breaker midway through the Australian Open because there was a case at a Holiday Inn in Melbourne. So there was no fans allowed for 5 days, which means all those ticket sales were gone and all those merchandise sales were gone. You could argue that the Australian Open really needs the money, and Novak Djokovic is the biggest draw. So that's why he's allowed to play. But look,
is he not a negative draw?
No, like, there's a huge Serbian population in Melbourne that absolutely love him. Like, I remember in his first round match last year, he was on court post-match interview, and the Australian interviewer asked him, oh, you got a bit frustrated there before this tournament, because he did something similar last year in terms, he was very vocal about being against the quarantine restrictions, that players had to isolate for 14 days if they're on a flight. If they're one of 72 players on 3 flights that had positive cases, they had to quarantine for 14 days. And Djokovic was saying, can you not let them out and play a bit of tennis and coach and have better food and all that? And the interviewer kind of alluded to that in the post-match interview on court. And Djokovic was like, what do you mean frustrated? And then the crowd started booing the interviewer because he has such a huge Serbian contingent in the crowd with him. So as many people that kind of dislike him are opposed to his views. There are a lot of fans who absolutely worship the ground that Djokovic walked on. And that'll be the case in Australia too.
Yeah, briefly, we talked about raising the roof there in a literal sense. So you'd imagine that the atmosphere could be really, really good at this between obviously the Serbian expats, I guess, back in Djokovic, and a lot of people who generally don't like him anyway.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, that's always been the draw with Djokovic. And, you know, for a guy who really wants to be, as well as being, you know, potentially the best player of all time, also the most loved player of all time. And I know it's the old adage, like, if you're trying that hard to be loved, it's never going to happen. And therefore, he polarizes so many people, and that's kind of the way his personality is anyway. So, like, the fact that he is playing, or it certainly looks like he's playing now as we speak today, that's just going to draw more people to it, isn't it? Because the first round match, people are going to tune in to hear what the crowd's reaction is going to be like. And also there's players saying, like Jamie Murray said yesterday, you know, if it was me applying for an exemption, I don't think I would have got it. And then Alex de Minaur, who's one of the top-ranked Australian players, described the unfolding events as quote-unquote interesting. So I'm sure there's a lot of players who don't like this. So
it's going to have to come out, isn't it?
I think so. Well, I don't think so, Nate. We want it to come out. It doesn't have to come out.
But I think it's in the interests of the Australian government that this will have to come out, whether it's officially released or whether it leaks out, because people don't care about Novak Djokovic in Australia coming and playing the Australian. It's not a case of, thank God that the best player of all time is coming to grace us with his presence. Yes, the Serbian community might be delighted to see him, but most people look at themselves selfishly and think, I've sacrificed an awful lot. We've been knocked down more than anybody else in the world. And we're making an exemption for somebody who's one of the most vocal anti-vaxxers in the world to come to this country. Like, they'll want to know why that has happened.
Well, look, that's what's already happened in the ensuing 24 hours since the story broke, is that the officials are basically pushing Djokovic to come out and say, you know, the reason he's got the exemption. And it is on him. He's the only person who's going to say it. And I don't think that's going to happen. But, like, for me, look, this is why we need a drive to survive for tennis. This is why Watarak exclamation point needs to be commissioned, because can you imagine the whispers behind the scenes at the moment between the players and staff? It's, you know, 100% the talking point of tennis. And tennis does itself no favours a lot of the time in attracting new audiences. But even though this is a negative story, this has piqued the interest of a lot of people, tennis fan or otherwise.
Thanks a million for your time. Best of luck with the booster jab this morning.
Thanks a million, Daddy. Thank you.
That was Colm Boohig. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning, Star with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. And here is what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio today. 1 p.m. OTB Gold with Dr. Harry Edwards on OJ. 3 p.m. Giles All-Time Spurs 11. Retro panel at 4. Gambling and Addiction. 6 p.m. OTB Gold with Catherine Switzer. Up next this morning on OTB AM, it's the nutritionist Daniel Davey. Do stay with us.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Football Pod with Paddy and Andy, our new weekly Gaelic football show with Paddy Andrews and Andy Moran.
All that has happened is people have come in here, right, listened to the pod for the last 29 episodes and seen the lifestyle that Paddy Andrews has had. He's wearing a Roddy Collins jacket, he's got his teeth done like Ross from Friends. He is looking he's looking magnificent and he's ready to go.
Just for the pod, lads.
Just for the pod.
Download the OTB Sports app and subscribe to the GAA podcast feed now.
With prices from only €289 for fully comprehensive car insurance, everyone's making the jump to getsetgo.ie. New business policies only. Prices subject to minimum premiums. T's and C's apply. MCL Insurance Services Limited Trading is getsetgo.ie is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
With Johan leaving and Stephen Larkham leaving, I think keeping a little bit of continuity there with Graham. I think,
but also he's world class. And
he's a top guy. He's old school as well. I played against him. He's coached on Lions tours. I think he's popular amongst the players, and he's someone who will try and keep working and trying to get a harder edge for that pack. I think it's still work in progress and it's difficult. It's very difficult to get some sort of continuity with your pack of forwards or your backs when there's a lot of chopping and change and games cancelled. So there's the mitigating factors. But this is good news that Graham Rowntree has signed. I think potentially could be a head coach depending what way this whole replacement of Johan van Graan and Stephen Larkham goes. Mike Prendergast is the other one that's been touted. So Graham Rowntree could step up and be a head coach, and then they may get some other coaches underneath. We don't know yet, but keeping him involved. He knows the players. He knows like you think if there's a complete sweep of new coaches there, they've got to get to know players again. They've got to learn and understand guys. He knows the players inside and out. He knows the ones that are putting it in, the ones that maybe are not, who need to be better. And they're the small things. And I like him. So I think he's an important part of Munster going forward, and that bit of continuity that you can keep there.
Yeah, that was Quinny speaking earlier on, and obviously the Munster debate does go on and on and on, and what is going to happen. We spoke to Ron Lagar about it earlier. That was Quinny with Niamh Briggs on this week's episode of the Red 78 podcast. You can subscribe now or check out the Rugby Channel social media pages to hear and watch the full episode, including a full breakdown on the underwhelming loss to Connacht Sports Ground and what lies in store for Munster this weekend. You're watching OTB AM, the sports breakfast show from Off the Ball, and good morning to you if you are watching and listening in. Right now we're delighted to welcome Daniel Davey, founder of DaveyNutrition.com, to chat to us about how you should be fueling your body while exercising. A lot of people, Daniel, will be probably watching this in the laptop, munching into their substandard cereal or whatever it is. Not you, I doubt it.
No, I'd say most people now are sort of back on track. It's been not your conventional type of Christmas, but no, I'd expect that people are on their porridge and granola this morning.
It's hard to believe how recently it is that, you know, diet wasn't that big of a deal in sport. You advised Leinster and Dublin GAA. Nowadays, obviously, it's everything. But what would you advise the guy or the girl who's just trying to get into a good routine in January in terms of a new fitness regime? What are the pointers that you would give him or her?
Well, I think first of all, it points to what brings about success and no matter what you're doing. And it's like, you need to have good clarity. It's not, we're going to go on a big push now in January with something that's probably unrealistic to sustain. So, success comes around having a good idea of what your priorities are and then working towards that. And I suppose that's what I've been fortunate enough to be exposed to. It's that you shouldn't be afraid of making small steps, because that's what we need to do.
Nathan, what are your New Year's resolutions on the food front?
Oh, well, you're probably talking, Daniel, to two people here who are on slightly different ends of the scale when it comes to fitness and looking after themselves, in the prime athlete in Johnny Ward and myself at the other end, unfortunately. What I like about you, following you on Instagram, Daniel, is like you obviously talk about building healthy habits, and you mentioned there about building something sustainable. I'm wondering, though, for somebody like in my position who is thinking, actually, I do need a significant change. Like, how do you go about that? Like, do you still think, actually, if you're not dealing with a Dublin footballer or a Leinster rugby player, for somebody who's thinking, actually, I need to make a significant change to whether it's my fitness regime or my eating habits, like that you should go all out in January and, do a dry January, change your diet completely, and then sort of ease off it slightly to something more sustainable then?
It's an interesting way of looking at it. But no matter how big the goal is, you still need to break it down. So whether it be an exercise goal or whether it be sleep or whether it be nutrition, if you want to achieve something but then sustain that success, and I think that's the point that a lot of people miss. It's like you have to build the skills and the knowledge and the practice up over the course of time, so that when you do get up there, to where you're looking to sustain or that you're happy with, you've built the skills along the way. There's an awful lot of cliches when you're approaching a goal, and it's the same in exercise too. But if you try and do something overly extreme, there is a kind of a metabolic, or there is a kind of an alarm system in the brain and in the head going, geez, what's going on here? Hang on a second. We've had a good December. We've had a good lead into Christmas. And now you're trying to restrict us from a calorie perspective. There's a big change in energy output. And that's why it's difficult to sustain that success. So one or two things at a time. And I've done this I've even mentioned some of this week on if you're looking to drop some body fat, it's body fat, not weight. So, making sure that you've got adequate energy, adequate protein, and that you're targeting about a pound a week, or a little bit more if you feel that you've got the skills in place to do it.
And you can eat perfectly healthy without having bland meals as well. I think that's a point that needs to be made here, isn't it? That there's a lot of really healthy food out there, a lot of food maybe that you haven't tried that is actually very, very good for you, particularly compatible with the athlete that might be in you in January.
Yeah, there's no question, and I suppose that's why I place so much emphasis on cooking. If you don't have the skills to prepare something that's tasty, or you don't have the things that are in the cupboard, it's very difficult to make very tasty meals. And when I started working in elite sport, a lot of the focus was on what restaurants or what menus would you recommend, or where can we get easy convenience meals to prep. Whereas if you learn a new skill, or you learn a couple of new very simple recipes that are tasty, that you enjoy, that you can go to, makes your life an awful lot easier.
Check out daveynutrition.com for more information, where you get various plans to achieve goals like performance, muscle building, fat loss and health improvements. You taking all this in, Nathan? The aim is to translate the science of nutrition into practical information like recipes, articles and meal guides on the website www.daveynutrition.com. Davey's going to give us...
My resolution for 2022 was to start in a positive manner, and I'm just getting beaten down this morning.
No. What was your dinner last night?
I'll be perfectly honest, and I as I say, I follow Daniel on Instagram, so I watch the sort of things he's cooking. My general 3 meals a day are very healthy. My problem, Daniel, is the snacking. And maybe that's something I should focus on, of actually making myself some healthy snacks. Particularly I find since I'm working from home, where at first I thought actually not being able to go out to the shop and things like that, but I find, I don't know, you have a bit more time hanging around the house, you're just wandering around the kitchen, you're picking something up. So my 3 meal, my breakfast, my lunch, my dinner are perfectly fine, perfectly healthy, all home cooked, all of that. It's the bits in between that are killing me.
That's a very good point, Sir Daniel, because the panacea that is working from home for a lot of people actually has a lot of pitfalls, and Nathan just mentions one of them there.
Absolutely. And it's funny, because we're working at home, there are certain habits that become better. We've got greater opportunity to move and things like that, but then we're much closer to the kitchen. And that's a challenge. But I would go back, first of all, to your 3 meals. I don't doubt that they're healthy, but making sure there's a good source of protein at each one, and particularly at breakfast, is absolutely critical. So I would have noticed exactly what you're talking about myself. It's very easy to overconsume on snacks like nuts, and I mean, I'm a devil for dark chocolate, and even drinking calories is, you decide to have a coffee and you want to have something with it. So first of all, make sure that the 3 meals you're having is a good source of protein. That'll help to manage your appetite. And then having clear structure about when your snack is. So if you say my snack is at this specific time, whether it be 11 o'clock or after my exercise, whatever, that really helps to go, this is what my structure is at home, because that's what your work environment brings. If you go into work, you're going to work, you're in the environment, you're committed to your whatever your meetings are, you're at your desk. It's creating that work environment. And one of the best things that I did was actually set aside a space that that you're working in, and that becomes your workspace, and you don't bring food into that, as an example.
Yeah, and an awful lot of people, even when they were working at their office, they ate at their desk at lunchtime, which is, we've a bizarre attitude to food in this country at times, where food should be a massive part of your day. It's very enjoyable, and some people rush through it. They don't even have time to make a proper dinner. If we have 3 to 5 go-to meals, Daniel, give us 3 to 5 go-to meals that'll bring us on the path to glory when it comes to food.
Well, I don't know, can you see this? But I made an overnight oats
look at this.
Night.
Got a bit of kiwi going on in there.
Bit of kiwi. I wouldn't normally trust it. I wouldn't be great on presentation.
You're just showing off.
Yeah.
No. Does
this count as a snack?
Yes. And the other one is actually very similar. So this one was an overnight oats, and the other one is like a little chia pudding, and that's a good high protein snack. You've got a little bit of chia seeds, and you've got a bit of whey and yogurt in there. And going back to the snack point, very often if snacks are like your typical granola bars, or you're just having a slice of bread with something, it's or a sandwich. Again, the protein is quite low in there, so you're not getting that kind of appetite management. But an overnight oats, a protein pudding. The other ones that I've down are something that's egg based is great, like frittata or baked eggs, very simple. And then what I like is if you can get used to making one good fish dish a week, because we eat
nowhere near enough fish in this country. We're an island nation. We export like 99% of our fish or something ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think going back to what you're setting your goals or have clarity on what you're going to do with your meals. If you can have a couple of days, I mean, we used to have like Fish Friday and things like that.
Back in the old good Catholic days in this country.
Yeah, but if you can set a day and say, you know what? So for me, I always like to start off my Monday with a fish dish, and that can be something like a fish pie, or it can be a simple pasta baked with salmon in it. These are very, very easy to make, and they work great for lunch the next day. And then the other one, like a curry, you can't go wrong with a curry, and it gets better and better as the week goes on.
Absolutely agree with you there, 100%. Neddy no-nos, what should we not be eating?
Well, do you know what? When I was thinking about no-nos, I actually changed it to not what we shouldn't be eating, because it's more about the portion of anything. So the dose defines the poison when it comes to any food. It's the same with alcohol, as we well know. But what I thought would be more useful is how you would approach the year. And I think one of the big no-nos or mistakes that people can make is not having something on paper. Putting something down and having a date on it and having clarity around, right, what's my priority? Is it a breakfast? Is it a snack? And just to give you a tiny, tiny, tiny example, I was working with a guy last year, and, there was some people put on weight and some people lost weight throughout COVID. This guy lost 4 kilos, right, over a very short space. Well, when I say short space of time, it was 3 months. But what he realized was lunch was a big issue for him. So you mentioned about your 3 good meals. But what he wasn't getting right was that he wasn't prepping lunch. He didn't have a facility to get a good meal at work. Now, what happened was very often he wasn't having enough calories, enough energy at lunchtime, and he's coming home. And what was he doing?
What was he doing?
He was straight to the fridge. He had a block of cheese melted on a toasty before he even had his
Nathan's dinner. Like, this man is my hero.
He was ravenous.
Nathan, you're jotting down notes frantically over there in the corner.
Absolutely. This is a free hit here. This is exactly what I need to start the year.
Well, putting something on paper is so the next thing. Have your goals, but don't be overly ambitious. Don't taking on something that's like, I'll give you an example. People go crazy tracking all of their food on apps and things like that. You don't need to do that. No harm to review what you're doing, but don't go obsessively tracking everything. You're not going to be obsessively tracking in 3 months, 6 months, and 8 months or next year. So don't do anything that is not unrealistic.
Our producer, Tommy Rooney, is frantically writing down almost everything you're saying here, Daniel. So it's definitely registering with him. And he's a couple of points here. 5 things you should have in your press. I like this one.
Okay, well, that's a very easy one. And I would say, there's lots, but when I went to the cupboards this morning, there's always oats, there's always nuts, there's always yogurt, eggs, there's always beans. If you want a quick beans on toast or something like that.
Just your bog standard beans.
Bog standard beans. You can always do a baked eggs with beans. I mean, a great lunch option. And this time of year, frozen veg or frozen fruit. People kind of ask me about that a lot. There's no excuse for not having some frozen fruit or frozen veg in you can make a smoothie bowl, you can make smoothies, you can make something quick like that. You can even make stuff for on top of your porridge, like a compote or something like that. And then frozen peas, frozen veg, very simple.
Ideally, do you fast before you sleep effectively? So eat as early as possible as your last meal.
You know what? I knew this was going to come up and I had it down here as well.
That literally just came into my head, so it's purely by the grace of God, the God that we mentioned earlier on Fridays with fish.
Yeah, so look, there's so many people. I mean, the fasting is a fascinating space, and meal timing is really fascinating because there are pros to it in the right context, with the right education, with the right skills. But a 12-12 approach is a really, really simple way to go about it. So fasting for 12 hours and eating within a 12-hour window. And that simply means that if you're going to bed at 10 o'clock, your last meal is about 8 o'clock. You know, if you're up in the morning, having your breakfast around 8, that's absolutely fine. But we want to do something that, you know, we're excited about and we want to talk about. So things like intermittent fasting and 16-8 are a lot more attractive to do. But if you apply 12-12, you get the same results.
Nathan.
Daniel, it's 9/18 on the 5th of January. I'm looking for a get out. What's your thoughts on dry January?
Well, I always like the question, what do you do yourself? Now, last weekend or over Christmas, I wouldn't be recommending to do what I do, but I'm not big on anything that's overly restrictive. Now, I will say that it's no harm to give the system a break if you've had a big December. Certainly no harm to go off it for a month or 6 weeks. But if you're a moderate drinker, you know, you enjoy a drink on a Friday and a Saturday night, and it isn't excessive. You know, you're not drinking a bottle of wine Friday and Saturday night, or you're having an odd drink, then there's no reason why you have to have a dry January. But having said that, if, like a lot of people, you've excessively consumed alcohol, it's no harm giving yourself a bit of a break.
Yeah, on a WhatsApp group with an erstwhile colleague who's regularly and off the ball, told him I was on dry January. He said, dry January, honestly, in a pandemic, the futility of it all. To which another colleague replied, all good my end, I've never done dry January, very against it.
Yeah,
it's the best time of year to go to all the best boozers. There you go, Nate.
Well, if you could go to them. Daniel, Johnny mentioned that our producer Tommy taking notes there, and Tommy's one of these lads, mid-20s, you know, keen club footballer, and I do get the sense that generation are very aware of their nutrition and of their body image and keeping themselves in shape. You obviously do a lot of work with, you know, Dublin GA and have worked with Leinster Rugby. Is that your sense that generation, the sort of 20-somethings, the more millennial types, are a lot better educated around all this than, say, myself and Johnny's age group were?
I think there's a real growing awareness that if you want to achieve something, you know, performance related, even if you're a high performer in your job, recreational athlete, or you're a competitive athlete, you can't achieve your potential if you're not getting your diet right. I mean, that is being accepted. And I think that principle is probably widely understood now than it was before. I mean, when I was playing football, even myself, I was the odd one out that was paying real attention to this. And there was this idea that if you're training hard enough and you're exercising regularly enough, then, you know, the diet will look after itself, which we now accept and know that it's just not the case. So there is now I will say, from a health perspective, so in the broader population, there's a major divide. So there's people becoming obsessive or really, really into the nutrition. There's still a lot of people being left behind.
And we all pine for simple answers. As simple as the answer can be here, how much of it, if people are like, and a lot of people are trying to lose weight at the moment and they're going into dry January or they're going into fitness January and blah, 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 blah. What percentage is nutrition? What percentage is exercise?
Well, okay, so I'll put it this way, and this is probably a very simple and tangible way to look at it. Exercise accounts for quite a small percentage of the calories that we burn in a given day. So if you're looking to improve your body composition, it's next to impossible to do it through exercise alone. And in fact, research has proven that if you don't have a good nutrition strategy alongside your movement and your exercise, then you're destined not to succeed, or certainly not sustain that fat loss. So you got to put the two of them together. And nutrition, I mean, it's fundamental. It's very difficult to put a percentage on it because it's absolutely different for everybody.
Well, you'll see a lot of people as well, like, who are they're very, very heavy in the gym. They eat a lot of eggs, as you mentioned, a lot of red meat as well. Where do you come in on that? I've seen it mentioned again, even I think at EU level, where basically they're kind of experts are warning against excess red meat. We were massive fans of beef in this country. What's your take on that?
Okay, so I'm a farmer from the west of Ireland, so I have to be always very careful.
The west is best this morning anyway in OTB AM.
Not pissing off the farmers. So firstly, red meat can still fit into the diet. Are we overly reliant on red meat? In some cases, but it's more so processed meat we have to watch out for. So it's more so our hams, our processed hams, processed meats. So once this is a really important point that's often not kind of emphasized. There's a protective effect if you're eating lots and lots of vegetables too. So if you're accompanying your meals, whether it be a bolognese or whether it be a lasagna or whatever, and there's loads of vegetables in there, that's a positive thing. But can we eat more varied food? Can we eat more fish? Can we eat more maybe vegetarian meals? We can, and we do need to adjust and do that. But I would say supporting local, getting Irish produce, Irish meat, and then getting the veg in with it is important.
I couldn't believe that recently, reading about like Irish prawns. 95% of them are exported because they're actually quite valued. And the prawns that we eat that look fresh and we buy even from reasonable places, they're coming from Argentina. I mean, it's wrong Brazil on so many levels. So we're exporting like so much of our fish. We're exporting, and like I guess I'm going off a bit of a rant here, but we should be buying stuff that's grown in this country because we actually export more than we eat ourselves.
There's no question, and I, I'm not going to be a hypocrite. When I go down to the local fishmonger, or I go into the butcher, and you see the prices, but
they're only prices relative to what's cheap, which shouldn't be cheap in the first place.
I know. Believe me, you're preaching to the converted, but it is if more people bought local, then it would actually improve the prices. So we drive down, consumers drive down the price of food all the time. We want cheaper and cheaper food. Whereas there is a very, very simple rule, broadly speaking, when it comes to food, and that is, if you invest in it, you get it back in your health, but you also get it back in the quality that you're consuming.
Totally. And if you had one last piece of advice for Nathan, myself, and anyone who wants to essentially eat healthier in 2022?
Not what you're going to expect. The biggest influencer when it comes to the success of a lot of goals is actually not to do it alone, to actually have this conversation with somebody. And if you are going to go after a nutrition or an exercise or some different thing, that you actually go, right, we'll go in on this. When you're part of a team or you're in a WhatsApp group or you're part of something, the chances of you sustaining that, or even if it's with your friend or your partner, your wife or whatever it might be, the chances of sustaining it and being successful are much, much higher.
Will you ever see Mayo win All Ireland?
He's a Sligo man.
I'm a Sligo man. We can't. We find it very difficult to. No. I do know what. A lot of respect for Mayo, but I can't say I'm going to jump on their bandwagon.
Yeah, it's strange, Nathan, because as much as we all kind of pine for Mayo, like just ending the famine, a lot of people in Connacht don't really seem to want it to happen either.
If you saw the abuse that poor us Sligo people get when we're bet out the gate by Mayo, it's very hard.
You see, Johnny, you're making the mistake that us Mayo people care what Galway people think about us, which I can assure you we absolutely do not. What we need to do is get
Tierney subject.
Yeah.
What we need to do is, because Dan's been working with the Dubs, like he's the man feeding the greatest team we have ever seen, and he's going all the way from Sligo up to Dublin. Down to Mayo?
Is there a cooler accent in Ireland than the Sligo accent? It's just that nice cushioned west of Ireland, Atlantic coast. We're outward looking, we're inward looking, we're cool people.
Never heard that before, not once.
Daniel, lovely to have you on.
Great to be on. Thanks for having me.
Check out daveynutrition.com for more information, where Dan and his team has various plans for you to achieve goals like performance, muscle building, fat loss and health improvements. The aim is to translate the science of nutrition into practical information like recipes, articles and meal guides on the website www.daveynutrition.com. Just channeling my inner Darina Allen there, Nathan.
You like your cooking, Johnny, do you?
I absolutely love cooking. It's one of the things I can't get my head around this country, and in general in the Western world, how people are so obsessed with work that they don't seem to find the time, even an hour in the day or half an hour in the day. And I realise with kids it might be difficult, but like eating a good meal and an enjoyable meal is one of the pleasures of life. It's one of the true pleasures of life. Not being online, not being on your phone, not like necessarily putting 10 pints of Guinness into you. It's eating a nice meal, can be healthy. First thing in the morning, have poached eggs, like have, you know, what Dan was showing there, all those beautiful fruits and, you know, just healthy food. And then put some time into it. Make your dinner, and don't eat watching TV preferably as well. You know, food and your dinner and all of that, it's been like since time immemorial, it's been such an important part of our day. And I feel that, and also as he mentioned, it wrecks my head how much food we export and how much we import to eat in this country when we basically should be self-sufficient apart from, you know, avocados and lemon basically.
It's the Johnny Ward manifesto for the new year. Try enjoying your cooking when you've got 3 kids, Johnny.
I'm conscious of that.
I absolutely loved cooking, but now when it's a needs must and they're looking at what you've put in front of them with disdain, it can be quite frustrating.
What are your I think we've like 2 minutes to get through here, so it's just Johnny and Nathan time here. Coach Murphy and
are we on dry January together? This is what Daniel was saying. You need somebody.
Like we're in the middle of the desert when the drugs start to take hold. We're in the middle of like the 5th of January when dry January starts to take hold. I was like, hang on a sec, it's only the 5th here, and I'm like,
there's 5 weekends in this January.
That's a tough one.
Mean anything anymore?
That is a tough one. You can probably guess who our colleague is who was dissing my dry January ambitions. And let's be honest, usually you don't get through it, but there's no point having a dream, Nathan. There's no point. There's nothing wrong with having a dream.
No, at all. And listen, if we get through this weekend, Johnny, we'll be doing well.
That's just not a good attitude at all. It's not a good attitude at all. You're
so if I'm here, if I ever get invited around to Johnny Ward's house, if for once it's the Ward feeding the Murphys rather than the other way around, what's Johnny serving up?
Last night I had mussels, which I hadn't actually cooked before. Often it'll be steak. I love curries. I love cooking food.
I have a fear of cooking fish. I'm not a big fish fan.
Why?
I've just never liked it since I was a kid. I do love prawns, but I have a fear of cooking prawns for some reason.
You have a fear of cooking prawns? Why?
That I'm not going to cook them enough, and I know it's almost impossible not to cook prawns enough.
Like fish is like, I think mussels probably aren't bought because people think it's hassle. Like they literally take about 3 or 4 minutes to cook. It couldn't be more straightforward.
To put a bit of sauce with them?
A bit of wine and cream, parmesan, garlic, onions. I mean, this is very basic stuff.
Back up a second. So you had the bottle of white wine open.
Yes.
Put in with the mussels. And did you fill yourself a glass?
No, I'm on dry January, Nathan. I'm on dry January. But yeah, just before, obviously before we go, I'm not sure if we're on again this week, what are your sporting hopes for 2022? Will Mayo finally win the All-Ireland? Tell me.
I think Mayo will go close. Once again, I'd never guarantee that Mayo would win an All-Ireland. Listen, my sporting hopes are the same as everybody, that we have full stadiums, that we can go to matches whenever we want to go to matches, and that we don't have any more lockdowns or anything like that. I find I can enjoy pretty much any sport, any match, regardless of the result, regardless of who's playing. Get back, maybe going commentating on Premier League games again, actually at the grounds would be a nice thing to do at some stage this year. I thought we'd be back by now. Maybe get to the World Cup.
Maybe. So, and the Shamrock Rovers under 8s are all right.
All right, but listen here, we were taught a lesson, but let's meet them again in a year's time, Johnny. Once we've Johnny Ward up for the motivational speech, and maybe you can put them on a sort of nutritional plan as well.
If there's one thing under
Dan McDonald's on with you tomorrow morning. He says we're going for pints on Saturday.
Actually, if there's one thing,
be home by 8 though, so it's fine.
If there's one thing an under 8 team needs, it's a motivational speech beforehand. You'll know all about it next year when you're playing under 9. Nathan, it's been great having you on.
Cheers, Johnny.
OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Join us tomorrow morning from 7:30 AM. This is a special one. Me and Dan McDonald with Dean Kiley, who is one of these fascinating members of the Irish backroom team, who's obviously just these riches all over the place in terms of the Irish goalkeeping situation at the moment. And as the third part of our Off the Couch series to launch the new year, Robbie Cannon, Shane Lowry's S&C coach, joins us. So we've had that series this week. I think it's been very interesting. Hope you've enjoyed it as well. Jessica yesterday, obviously Daniel this morning, and tomorrow we'll talk to Robbie. Right now on OTB AM, we'll bring you Andy Mitten in conversation with Joe on last night's Off the Ball about Ralph Rangnick's rocky start to life at Manchester United.
You are most welcome back. So we're turning to events at Old Trafford last night. Very happy to say Andy Mitten, editor of United We Stand, is with us. Evening, Andy.
Good evening.
1-0 defeat to Wolves. João Moutinho on 82 minutes. A first win for Wolves at Old Trafford since 1980. They were really good, and you don't want to take too much away from them, but needless to say, the story here is Manchester United. They had 9 shots to Wolves' 19, just 2 of them on target, and Ralph Rangnick already seems like a man under pressure. Even the nature of the interviews afterwards and the tone of the post-match discussion on TV. This is like a guy who's 3 years in, and people are looking at the job he's doing saying, well, where is this going? So it's amazing how this job quickly eats you up.
It does, and it's one of the biggest jobs in world football. I think you're right in everything you say, especially about Wolves. Wolves deserve to win. Wolves felt that they deserved something from the league game at the start of the season, which Manchester United won. And I think even Ole Gunnar Solskjaer would say, of all the games his team won before he left, that was the one where perhaps he didn't deserve to win. Wolves were impressed at Old Trafford when they came up in 18. Ruben Neves was fantastic, but it's the first time that they've won. And the story, as you say, is not about Wolves winning, although it will be in Wolverhampton, but Manchester United losing, and the mood has just hit the floor. It really has slumped, because it wasn't just a defeat at home to Wolves. It was a defeat after a series of really unconvincing displays by Manchester United. Most recently at Newcastle, a team who'd won 1 out of 19 last week. That was when I last spoke to you. But even before that, when United beat Norwich and Crystal Palace and drew against Young Boys, the team was not playing well. Okay, half an hour in the first game under Rangnick against Palace at home. But aside from that, the fans have been asking what's changing here. Well, what has changed is that the team have stopped losing matches, has stopped conceding as many goals, but very little by the way of chance creation and just really boring football.
Yeah.
And United fans are not stupid. They know what they're watching, and they're just watching football which falls well short of the standard that they expect. Now, they're not putting all that on the manager because he's not been in the job for a long time, but some of it is on the manager and some of it is on the players as well.
Well, I have my suspicions what every single fan would say if they were vox popped afterwards and asked, what do you think of this 4-2-2-2-2 business? It's just not worked. And you mentioned the Newcastle game, the last half hour there was no formation. I mean, it was shambolic, really, is the most generous term. Aside from that first half hour against Palace, it's hard to think of anything promising about what Ralph Rangnick's bringing to the party here.
Yeah, the first half was good against Burnley when United scored 3 goals, which isn't a given. But you're right. In the first half against Palace, there was a noticeable difference. But even in that game, Ayew should have scored for Palace just before Manchester United did score the goal. And it's really worrying because United are not even playing the best teams. Wolves were the best side that United have played since Rangnick took over. Although when he took over, it followed those 3 games which Michael Carrick had been in charge. And United did really well. That draw at Chelsea when they'd gone ahead. Excellent result in Villarreal and beating an inform Arsenal team at Old Trafford. Carrick made his decision to move on, even though the manager wanted him to stay. And Kieran McKenna and Martin Pert, 2 other coaches, they also moved on, even though the manager wanted them to stay. So this is part of the problem you've got here. New coaches have been brought in the half-light of a Manchester winter to work with players, not in the way that they would hope because of all the COVID restrictions. The training ground has been closed down, but other clubs have got problems with COVID as well. And there's a lot of talent at Manchester United, and the collective level of that talent at the moment is way, way below what it should be.
Because Rangnick was asked after the game last night about the pressing or the lack of pressing, and he said, yeah, no, we didn't. And after 15 minutes, it was apparent that we couldn't get into the positions to hurt them in that part of the pitch, and they had constant outballs to their wing-backs. It's so rudderless in that he arrives and you know, where he's at his most powerful is going to be the first game, and in that first half hour against Palace, there's a real effort to press. And you think, well, here's the godfather of gegenpressing, and he's going to try and make Manchester United a pressing team. Now, most of us looked at that and said, well, with Ronaldo leading the line, best of luck. But they made a fist of it against Palace for half an hour. And since then, nothing. And you kind of wonder, like, what are they? What are they going to be if Ronaldo is playing and if this team can't seem to even press Wolves at Old Trafford in front of 75,000? Like, the best they've managed, Andy, maybe in the last 2-3 years under Solskjaer, is when he looked at the team and said, we don't have a controlling midfield player in there. Let's just be a damn dangerous counter-attacking team. And they were. And you think of their better results, Spurs away or PSG or some of those other results, the Man City results. They had the horses to be a really good counter-attacking team. They didn't have the horses to be a controlling possession team when Solskjaer tried to move that way. They didn't have the horses to be a pressing team. That really blew up in their faces against Liverpool at Old Trafford when they tried to press, and it was apparent they just couldn't do it. And now Rangnick's come in and tried to press. They look like they've tried to do it for half an hour. The rest of the time, I don't really know. And so there's nothing to be optimistic about here. Like, this whole thing has really gone out of control.
There's very little to be optimistic about. You covered lots of different points there. And I sense that the tone of this conversation is going to be pretty bleak, because that's how I feel about Manchester United at the moment. There are two tiny shreds of optimism. Phil Jones came back and had a good game. He was Manchester United's best player. Yeah. And the second best player was probably David De Gea. He's having a good season, but that's partly because Manchester United are under the cosh so much and the goalkeeper's having a lot of things to do. The rest of them, they leave a huge amount to be desired. And there looks like a complete lack of control in games, which has been the case throughout most of the season. As you said, Ole Gunnar would often counter-attack with great effect. The best example of that last season was against Manchester City away, when Anthony Martial, remember him, was the man of the match, and United won the game against the best team in the country, a team who was still the best team in the league, and the league's won already. As far as I can see, I just cannot see Manchester City dropping points. But my concern is more with Manchester United, and it alarms me because it wasn't supposed to be like this. The team finished second last year, and if we compare like for like with where United are after 19 games, well, after 19 games last year, United were top of the league. And this year, the seventh, albeit with a couple of games in hand. United have conceded more goals this year, and they've scored fewer goals as well. So you can look at a whole different number of statistics. Last night against Wolves, the number of times the players gave the ball away was also alarming. And we're talking 5 or 6 players here, which leads me to think that the confidence of the players is lower than it should be. I know that there are issues in terms of the new coaches coming in. It's a new working environment for the manager. He still talks a good game. He's impressive when he talks to the media, and I've spoke to him before and after several matches. He's very clear, he's very concise with his answers. He's clearly an intelligent man. But when he got the job, I spoke to people in Germany who know him far, far better than I ever did. And they said he's a builder. He builds projects which take 3 years. And he's not got that at Manchester United this season. He's got 6 months to impress. And he's got a hell of a job. He's got a really, really difficult job because there are big egos in that dressing room. You've got some players who want to leave the club. You've got his coaches who are largely unknown. They've got to win over some of the biggest names in world football. And when the team stops winning and other teams pull away, that's when blame starts being apportioned. As a journalist, my job is to find the truth out. And I'm finding there's 3 or 4 different versions of the truth with Manchester United at the moment because it is so subjective. And yeah, that was clearly a terrible result against Wolves. The night before, I'm looking at the league table thinking, if Manchester United win the games in hand, they're going to shoot right up to... And as I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, why are you being such an idiot? This is an illness. They're not going to win the games in hand. They've been so unconvincing throughout this season. Even in the first 5 games when I think United won 4 and drew 1, they were unconvincing, and Wolves was one of those games. Even in that Newcastle game when Ronaldo came back, Newcastle controlled the game for large passages of that match. So there's been worries throughout this season. The form fell off a cliff. That's why Ollie lost his job. And the new manager bounce has not happened with Ralph Rangnick.
Well, do you know what was also incredibly striking last night was the Old Trafford crowd have, post-Ferguson, generally had his words ringing in their ears. Your job now is to back the manager. And in fairness to them, they have been loath to turn on a manager. It's very rare there's been boos at Old Trafford, and it's been a long 8 years and counting, and it's going to be another long 8 years, I suspect, given where they are now. So Rangnick's barely in the job. This was his first defeat last night, and he substitutes Mason Greenwood, and the Old Trafford crowd boo. Now, I thought that was really telling. They're fed up with this whole situation. They don't like the early signs of what this guy's about. There's no emotional investment in him because he's probably gone at the end of the season anyway. I just thought that was a real sign that this thing is now going to get messy. If they don't even have this sense of, oh look, we're a club that stands by the manager. Ferguson, 26 years, he told us keep standing by the next manager. That's kind of our thing. I mean, that was a massive departure from what we've seen under the previous managers, and I suspect now we're going to see booing this season at Old Trafford around what I would presume to be several bad results on the way, and it's going to get messy now, Andy. It's going to get really messy.
Well, it could do, but whenever we've been in this point in recent years, somehow, largely under Solskjaer, Manchester United have managed to turn things round.
Yeah.
I'm not optimistic about where the team are right now, and that decision to take off Greenwood was booed for two reasons. One, because fans were seeing the team outclassed, and two, because he was one of Manchester United's best player, and it didn't make much sense to bring him off. Granted, Bruno Fernandes did very well when he came on, although he should have scored. And your other point about the emotional investment, yeah, Ralph Rangnick, he will be given a fair chance by patient Manchester United fans at matches, but he isn't a club hero like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was. And Solskjaer was hugely popular. Might not have always come across online, and often it didn't. And there were a sizable number of people who wanted him out after 6 months, after a year. But in real life, at the club and at the games, he was a very, very popular man. Now, by the end of his time, you go to places like Atalanta and you'd speak to fans, and nobody thought that he should stay, but they wanted him to. They wanted him somehow to turn it around, and that didn't happen. And he lost his job, but there isn't that bank of credit for the new manager, for his coaches, and the frustration is much more likely to boil over. Not just with him, because I believe that every manager should be given a good amount of time, but with the players and with the ownership of the club. So there were anti-Glazer chants at Old Trafford last night against Wolves coming out of the Stretford End. The Stretford End was loud. You also saw a section of Old Trafford trialling safe standing legally for the first time since 1994. So I think that was really encouraging as well. A tiny sliver of a positive amid all those negatives.
I think one of the reasons people this morning and last night were so sure that there's serious trouble at this club was the Luke Shaw interview as well. This is more than just teething trouble and a new manager struggling to get his message across and disrupted preparation. So here's a glimpse of, not the full interview, because I mean, this is not a guy being misquoted. This is not one line being devoured and taken apart and blown up into something that's not. This was a long interview, so this is not the full interview. So Luke Shaw talked about the lack of effort, frankly, and Patrick Davison here in Sky Sports goes back to those kind of points. Have a listen.
Just the last one on the team, because you said there was a sense almost of not being all out there together. What do you mean by that, and how do you get it? 'Cause it's a criticism you have faced in the past.
It's tough. I think you look at our squad, you look at our team, the players we have. We have unbelievable quality. We have great quality, and I think sometimes quality isn't enough. I think, like I said, we need to bring the intensity. We need to bring, being more aggressive, and we need to bring more motivation. I think, maybe from the outside today, it didn't look like we had any of them three. But inside the dressing room, we know we want to win. We know what we want. But I think when we step out on that pitch, we need to give 100%, everything we've got. And I'm not saying, not everyone did, but I think to win these types of games against a tough team like Wolves, we all need to be 100% committed, because we know it's always close games, whoever they play. And yeah, like I said, it's just tough and disappointing, but we have time now to refocus back. We got a long training week, and maybe the manager can bring some more ideas that what he wants on the pitch.
Thanks, Luke. Thank you. Cheers. Thank you.
There we are. To be fair to him, I didn't think the last comment was a major dig at Rangnick. I thought it was a more generous point that he hasn't probably had the time as a manager to get his ideas across. But who knows? Everyone's under pressure right now. Earlier in the interview as well, I thought he was far more even damning of his teammates. In effect, Andy, most people interpreted him as saying not everybody on that pitch, in fact quite a few, are not trying as hard as they could be.
I thought Luke Shaw looked crestfallen about his body language, the words that he said, and when I first heard it, I was struck by the last line there, and I thought he's searching to his manager. He's not having a dig, but give us some ideas, because I know what's going on there, and I know that it's difficult for Ralph Rangnick and his new coaches at the moment with the players for the reasons that I outlined. I am told that the players are trying, but then who's telling me that? I'm getting feedback from all sorts of different sources who know that. I think they want to do well. I don't think they deliberately go out there to lose football matches. I think they want it to work out, but the confidence looks really low. And right throughout that game, Wolves were the better side, and those statistics you said at the start, and we can add even more, the number of corners that Wolves had. Manchester United are not scoring goals from set pieces. There are so many worrying areas, and even the players that we had faith in, like 2 weeks ago, I was writing things like, it will be great when Raphael Varane and Edinson Cavani are back, and they're back, and somehow they get sucked into the mire as well. Cavani was very good when he came on at Newcastle, and I think Varane is an excellent player. Well, at least alongside Phil Jones. Obviously, he's got an experienced master next to him. But the others, that midfield was a painful watch last night. Scott McTominay completely overrun with Nemanja Matic, and that's part tactical as well. And yet McTominay had been the best player on the pitch against Burnley. So there's consistency issues here as well. You're getting players putting in 8 out of 10 performances, and the next week 5 out of 10 performances. But results control the mood of everything. If United would have won that game 1-0 last night, I'm not even sure you would have rang me. I think that the mood would have been different. It's like he's finding his feet and he's managing to win while he's finding his feet. But when that goal went in after 82 minutes, it absolutely sank. And I had my lads outside the ground selling United We Stand. And that is a very real environment where after the game, they are hearing what people are saying. They are soaking in some of those comments. And trust me, they were not nice after the game yesterday. And there's a feeling that this season is already coming to nothing. And a very capable Aston Villa team could knock Manchester United out the FA Cup next week. And then what? You know, the 4th place, okay, other teams are dropping points as well. But Manchester United need to get a run out somewhere. And that hasn't happened at all this season.
One last point I'd be very curious about is the mood in the dressing room, the atmosphere in the dressing room, the level of unity that's there. One thing you felt Solskjaer had for the bulk of his regime was a sense of unity, seemed to restore that bit of spirit post-Mourinho, and that does not seem to be the case anymore. Bruno Fernandes was always liable to throw his hands in the air and always had a body language issue, but that has very much continued now, and naturally when results aren't as good, he's doing it more often. And then there's a sense that Ronaldo, I don't know, is Mason Greenwood's nose out of joint? I don't know, is the Bruno Fernandes-Ronaldo dynamic great? I mean, they seem to get on in certain points. In other ways, I mean, you miss your first penalty with Ronaldo standing behind you, and then he's on penalties, and he used to be the main man, and you're not the main man anymore. I don't know how well that sits with you. The Cavani situation was tricky. Where's Harry Maguire? I don't know. A lot of young players in there as well, looking around at all these dynamics. Managers changing. Pogba's his own entity. It does not seem like a good dressing room anymore. And Gary Neville's made that point about the body language. What are you hearing about the clickiness or otherwise in there now? Where is that dressing room?
It's not a great dressing room. And a lot of that is down to the confidence. You've got big egos. You've got a lot of frustration as well, because these are players who wanted to be winning titles. One of the reasons they joined Manchester United was they were sold a dream. Obviously, they're well paid. That goes without saying. And when the team is 7th in the league, there's a lot of frustration there. Now, if you ask 25 players or people close to them what their version of events is, you're not going to get one straight answer, because the player who's getting picked every week and doing all right is going to give you a very different answer to someone who feels like he should be getting picked every week and isn't doing all right. And there were always issues, even when Ollie was there and things were going great. The guy who was number 15 or just making the match day squad rather than a specific number was never delighted because he wasn't playing as much. And Ollie obviously had his favourites as well. what I've said is that I know there are issues with training at the moment. The new manager's trying to put across his ideas, and there are unhappy players. There are players who want to leave. Anthony Martial wants to leave.
And are the issues they don't like the messages he's given them or what he's advocating? I did read at one point they're not happy that training slightly later in the day. Surely it's more than that.
Yeah, it is more than that. I mean, You've got the half-light of a Mancunian winter. You're training in the dark at 3:45, which isn't great for everybody. And these type of things tend to seep out when things are not going well. When you're winning, you don't hear anything like this. And you've got a new manager mid-season trying to put his ideas into place with the coaches that the players have never heard of. Popular coaches have left, coaches who the manager wanted to keep. Michael Carrick, Kieran McKenna, Martin Pert. I wrote that a couple of weeks ago. Nobody wants to hear that because they associated them with a past failed regime under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. They want to hear about the shiny new manager and how he's going to change everything and how everything's going to improve. So the fans also are part of this because they really welcomed in Cristiano Ronaldo, and now people are saying, not sure that was quite the right thing.
And what's your read on that? Because I would question it. I wonder what he's done to the dynamics in there.
People are extremely divided on it. You can argue both sides very, very strongly. Manchester United wouldn't be in the Champions League if Ronaldo wouldn't have been playing to get those late great winners, but the players around him, their productivity levels have dropped right off. The number of goals being scored has dropped right off. The number of goals the other players are scoring, it's a real worry. And I wonder how Manchester United are going to get out of this with an interim manager who, if he does really well, will get power because he'll be seen as the main man who knows what he's doing to influence the decision of who's going to replace him. And if he doesn't, I'll never forget what one home and away Manchester United fan said to me when he got the job. Who is this guy? And if he's that good, why has he not been managing? And why has he not been at any of the top clubs in Germany? Sounds like a bit of a blagger to me. Now, that same person who goes everywhere with Manchester United, after the team had a couple of decent results, he's like, I'm prepared to give him a chance. But that just shows how fan sentiment can really roll with it. And these are the conversations that Manchester United fans, I'm sure many of them are watching and listening to this at the moment, they'll have very, very strong opinions about whether Ronaldo was right or wrong to come back. And on all of the players, and some of them will be doubting the new manager, and some of them quite rightly will be saying he deserves time, and every manager does deserve time. But it's a pretty grim place for Manchester United right now, especially with City looking so good and winning absolutely everything.
Perfect storm. Andy Mitten, editor of United We Stand. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
It's an odd situation. Some of the things he said were odd. They were couched in certain language. But if you do that and you start talking about other clubs that you could have played for, your club, it doesn't matter who you are. Say you are at Bayern Munich and you start saying, I could have been in Barca, I could have been Real Madrid, I prefer Chelsea. It's going to annoy anyone. It's really going to annoy. And to think that it won't annoy anyone is staggering. So you try to read as much into it as you think is fair. And you think, are you trying to get a move? That's the first thing you do. Yes, the first thing you think, isn't it? Are you trying to get a move? It seems odd. I mean, because you're not going back to Italy. For whatever said in the interview, you ain't going back to Italy because they can't afford you. There's no chance they're going to afford you what it would cost to take them back. So that seems odd. That if this agents say they know nothing about it, then it can't be you've had a nibble from somebody else, or it shouldn't be you've had a nibble from somebody else. And who is going to take them at the moment? There are only a very, very small number of clubs that can afford them. So why are you kind of stirring this pot? It's very, very difficult to figure out what he was doing, unless he's been a bit daft about it. But I think he's too intelligent for that. Honestly, trying to cover where he's going. The clever thing he's done is apologise now. And that's what you do. When you look at it from a club's point of view, and this is the more important part of it, the most important part, what would Pep do if somebody started doing that? He'd dump them. He'd elbow them. Get lost. You're at a club that you should be proud of being at. What would Jurgen do at Liverpool? He would do the same. He said, no, if you don't want to be with us, right, shove, off you go. We'll move you on. But if this isn't good enough for you and you're not buying into this, then away you go. Right. Why should Thomas Tuchel be any different from them two? If he's any different from them two, he's definitely seen as weak, not only by Lukaku, but by his own dressing room as well. He had absolutely no choice to do what he actually did, and he did it, and it was the right thing to do. Happily, and this is the very interesting thing about Thomas Tuchel. Lukaku comes back and plays against any important games coming up. Well, Spurs, is it that important? We don't know, but really important games coming up, right? That's when you really gauge it. It's not Carabao Cup. You gauge it really, because some people would suggest if you get back for Carabao Cup, that's huge.
Yeah. Well, they've Man City coming up.
Exactly. So there's Man City coming up, and then there's Spurs coming up in the league after that, right? So that's the two. If he plays in them two, or he's on the bench in them two, then Thomas Tuchel done what he usually does, which is, you're not doing what I want you to do, you're out.
And just everything else. And they haven't managed to get the equivalent of the Masters and the British Open or Wimbledon, those marquee events dotted around the calendar year for whatever reason.
It's true. It just has not happened whatsoever. And Sky have done such a remarkable job in making this what it is. And like the production quality on the darts compared to what it used to be is obviously on a whole other level. But they're bringing that to the table throughout the Premier League, throughout a lot of pretty much all of the PDC blue ribbon events. Like they still have the rights. They're still bringing this to the table. And to be honest with you, it's midweek darts by and large, and there wouldn't be a whole pile of competition except for in Champions League nights when these things get up and running. So it's a strange beast, Christmas darts. Like, I mean, people checking in and people who genuinely are not sports fans following the sport of darts throughout Christmas is, to me, something that I still can't get my head around. And for me, it's the fact that somebody has it on TV and it's quite accessible and people can follow it. I mean, like you're explaining to people in the house that you need to finish on a double, which is the only rule of darts. Like, I mean, the crash course in darts is you got to finish on a double, crash course over. And all of a sudden those people a couple of hours later are like, great standard, best standard ever. It's like they've been fans forever. So like, it almost feels like I'm trying to turn your question away, Joe. The honest answer is I don't know. I don't know what's actually happening here in between, what's breaking down between these two things, because the standard certainly isn't the issue. And in fact, you actually see every so often a story spark up between a little rivalry developing between a couple of these players, which I would say is the exact thing the sport needs. But the familiarity throughout the season when they're on tour does breed a little bit of contempt. I'm not saying there's all-out brawls or anything like that, but there is a little bit of needle between some of these players. And that exists throughout the season, but the interest just isn't there until you get to whatever it is, the 10th, 12th of December.
Well, in the big picture, not a chance can I explain Antonio Brown. I think this is, as you alluded to, this is a guy with a long history of different incidences, and this one is the most recent. In this specific case, we don't know yet because Brown himself hasn't given a specific explanation. There's been some different reports that, Arians wanted to put him in the game and he refused to go in, so Arians told him to go to the locker room. And then there was something kind of spread from his side that he didn't want to go in the game because of an injury, which presumably would be the ankle, which he had in the past. But that, I don't know. I don't know if I believe that, to be honest. It seems more like an after-the-fact explanation because, one, I saw him dancing through the end zone as he was jumping up and down and waving to the crowd and stuff on the way off the field. And he was, really close to a lot of salary bonuses. So, to me, if the argument was, I want to be in the game, to get those bonuses, I think, because there was some contention that maybe he was annoyed at not getting enough targets. So I don't know which way you can have it with Brown. I just feel like he doesn't get the benefit of the doubt in my estimation.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.